Chapter 355. Everyone worked together to speed up the rescue operation. Digger and his bodyguards also arrived at the scene. They all wanted to show off in front of their new boss, so they fought to be the first to join the rescue operation. The team gradually moved from the South City to the North City. Many hot-blooded citizens who were not injured also automatically followed Sia's team. After all, Sia's team was very capable and had a large number of people. They could even be said to be the only rescue force in the city. "Please God, can someone help me?" Thea heard a faint voice calling out to her. "Get a few people to follow me over there." Thea did not have time to explain. She led Digger to the west. She saw two middle-aged men trying to pry open a stone slab. A woman was struggling in the gap. "Editor Perry?" Sia realized that this was an acquaintance. This guy was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet. Although Louise Lane had done all the interviews, Sia also knew the editor-in-chief. "You are? Oh, Miss Thea, come help." At first, the old man didn't see who Sia was. In order to increase her reputation, Sia, who was a little bit of a clean freak, also went all out. Now, her face was covered in dust. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't recognize her. More than 10 strong men rushed forward and rescued the female reporter who was pressed down below. "Is everyone okay?" The female reporter had just crawled out and hadn't even caught her breath when she saw Louise Ryan running over from afar. Louise did not know that Sia had been involved in this matter, either openly or covertly, but she recognized Sia in an instant. The two of them greeted each other, and at the same time, a thought appeared in their minds. Why is this guy here? Sia's thoughts were very simple. Why did she always see this guy in dangerous places? Is there a mistake in my memory? Is Louise Lane not an ordinary person? Does she have the ability to teleport to wherever there is danger? I remember that she was in Washington before this. She looked behind Louise Lane and saw that a large number of American troops had entered the city. General Swanwick was directing the rescue operation with a righteous face. F***CK. How dare you fight with me for prestige? Thea couldn't take it anymore. She told the people from the Daily Planet to go back and rest while she led the rest of the team to harvest the worship of the citizens. Superman had originally planned to call it a day and go home after the fight. However, when he saw Thea helping with the disaster, he thought about it and started to rescue the citizens. Most of the people would form 3 groups to help the disaster relief. Superman was busy working alone. Ordinary people couldn't keep up with his strength and speed, and the ruins were all caused by his battle with Zod. Now that Zod was dead, the resentment of the citizens would naturally be vented on him. Although he had indeed helped a lot of people, it was impossible for the citizens to be grateful to him. The other 2 groups of rescuers were Thea and the military. Both of them had a lot of followers following behind them. Thea seemed to be more approachable. She actively helped the injured and treated everyone equally, regardless of whether they were rich or poor. General Swanwick's image wasn't as good. After all, he was in his 50s. Thea helping an old lady was an act of kindness. He really couldn't bring himself to help an old lady. What if he was called a hooligan? However, the military's reputation still attracted many citizens to join his rescue team. Those who didn't know the inside story of Thea's actions would only think that she was being kind. However, General Swanwick knew the truth. He wasn't sure if she was being kind or not, but Thea leading 4 or 5 young people and pretending to be struggling to rescue the citizens under the cement pillars was 100% putting on a show. However, he didn't object to putting on a show. How many people around him didn't put on a show? From a certain point of view, he was even a little relieved. This was the performance of one of his own people. Politicians weren't afraid of putting on a show because they did it too. It didn't matter if there was one more or one less person. What they were afraid of was someone with impeccable moral integrity. For example, the guy in the blue tights and red cloak in the distance, who was known as Superman, had perfectly demonstrated what it meant to have his feet touch the ground. He had been hovering in the air to rescue people, and his feet didn't touch the ground at all. This made General Swanwick feel a little empty. Could such a person really obey the orders of the country and respect the Constitution? "General, the young heir of the Quinn Group wants our transport plane to help her transport the medical pod?" One of the African minister's subordinates reported to him. Thea didn't intend to reveal her identity in front of everyone. The African minister immediately understood what she meant and nodded in agreement. Benefits were also a way to build relationships. It couldn't be a one-sided effort. Only by helping each other could the relationship be stable. The two didn't communicate with words or eyes. They completed the cooperation tacitly. With the orders of the Minister of Defense, the military transport plane C-17 was mobilized quickly. In less than half an hour, the medical pod produced by the Quinn Group had been transported to the metropolis. 70% of the injured citizens had external injuries. A series of debridement and suturing work could be completed within 10 minutes of lying in the medical pod. The medical personnel on the scene were still dissatisfied with this kind of technological equipment for destroying their livelihood, but they were secretly relieved that their workload had been greatly reduced. Superman could destroy the world, but he didn't have the ability to heal. Seeing that Thea's medical ability was fast and that countless seriously injured people were transported over, the citizens finally had a good impression of him under his perseverance. They were no longer as cold as before. However, medicine couldn't cure diseases. No matter how heaven-defying the medical pod was, it couldn't save the dead. When the rescue team arrived at the ruins of the former Luther building, a large number of the dead were transported out. The impact was swift and violent. Many people were not as decisive as Luther and were directly buried under hundreds of tons of rubble. Superman didn't know that his ability was strongly feared by the military. With a combination of X-ray vision and super strength, although most of the buried people were dead, he still rescued a few seriously injured people. "Chairman, we found Mr. Luther's secretary. She's seriously injured," a senior executive whispered to Thea. Thea had already seen the secretary sent out by Superman, Mercy Graves. This woman was not only Luther's secretary, but also his bodyguard. She was extremely skilled and could even exchange a few blows with Death Knell. She was loyal to Luther. The only pity was that her name wasn't good. Mercy? Mercy? Whether it was the original space-time or the present, she had been ruthlessly abandoned by Luther. The secretary sent out by Superman was seriously injured. Her usually cold and delicate face was a little distorted. Although her reaction wasn't bad, she didn't have the technological equipment. The impact was too fast. She relied on her superb skills to avoid fatal injuries. However, falling from a height of hundreds of meters still put her body in a state of near death. Both of her legs were fractured and her organs were severely damaged. With the current medical conditions, it would take a miracle for her to recover. Save her. Thea glanced coldly at the senior executive who wanted to offer advice and stopped him from speaking. Near evening, the construction team of the Quinn Group arrived and built simple houses for all the homeless people to live in. Chapter 356. After taking a stroll outside and finding that the metropolis was safe, Luther and the president, who had been hiding in the basement, also sent a special envoy. The two groups of people arrived at the metropolis at the same time. Before the special envoy could make a passionate speech, he was stopped by Luther, who had arrived one step ahead of him. "What did you say? Ask the government to compensate your building and employees' pensions? Mr. Luther, are you sure you're not overly shocked?" The special envoy was a middle-aged man with a hooked nose. He refused Luther's request without hesitation. "If you don't want to compensate, then the military should pay. In short, your incompetence has caused me great losses. You have to give me an explanation." The long-haired Lex Luthor ignored the angry stares of the special envoy and Swanwick. His expression was solemn and serious. Luthor was different from Bruce, who was severely constrained, and Thea, who had just taken over the group. His personal prestige was at the top of the group. He had hidden some technological weapons and secret bases all over the world, always in case of sudden changes. He didn't care how much the building and the employees' pensions cost. He just wanted to take the opportunity to get some benefits, such as the wreckage of the alien spaceship, or Zod's body. But he seriously underestimated the military's fear of Superman. "Dream on. You want the military to compensate." The military also provided protection. Now most of the people who are treating the civilians are soldiers. Swanwick refused immediately. "No way. These things belong to the military. No one could touch them." Luther's hidden strength was not small, but he couldn't openly confront the U.S. military. His eyes flashed with wisdom, and in the end, he chose to wait and see. "Miss Quinn, thank you for treating my employees." Luther was arrogant, but he was not a rude person. On the contrary, he was very polite. Seeing Thea constantly treating the wounded, he immediately rushed over and expressed his gratitude to Thea. "Mr. Luther, you're too polite. This is what I should do. Your secretary, Miss Mercy Graves, is seriously injured. If you have a better way, you should treat her quickly. Thea wanted to see how Luther would respond. Luther's eyes flashed with a strange light. Thea did not intend to let go of this opportunity. She said with a hint of sarcasm, Miss Mercy's name is not good. Mercy? Pity. Hee, Mr. Luther only believes in himself. He doesn't need pity. Lex Luthor still maintained his demeanor as if he hadn't heard anything. He nodded slightly. I'm going to visit my employee. Humph. Thea snorted softly. She didn't expect this little episode to defeat Luther. It had nothing to do with right or wrong. She just felt that the arrogance in his bones was annoying. The treatment lasted for 3 days. Whether it was the president or the various representatives, they went around the metropolis like a merry-go-round. Other than showing their presence, they did not provide any practical help. Because the nature of the incident had not been determined, was it a natural disaster or a man-made disaster? They couldn't even find the culprit. Student Superman had escaped that very night. Now, the person who appeared in the metropolis was a young man from Kansas with old-fashioned eyes. His name was Clark Kent. There were injuries and deaths in the Daily Planet, so there were many vacancies. Naturally, he successfully obtained the position of an intern reporter. These Americans' face blindness is too serious. This disease needs to be cured. Can't they recognize him just by wearing ordinary clothes and a pair of glasses? Thea saw Brother Superman pretending to be an ordinary reporter from the corner of her eye, and couldn't help but think so. She was now sitting in the audience. A representative from Kentucky, Ms. Joan Vinci, was giving a passionate speech. Thea pretended to listen carefully and clapped from time to time to show her attitude. Ms. Vinci, what you said was great, Thea said after the meeting. Thea, you're getting more and more beautiful. What a sweet mouth. Joan Vinci was Moira's political ally. Whether Moira's next step was to enter Congress or run for governor, she would need a lot of supporters. Thea just showed her support and didn't say much. She now had more things to do than these politicians. The cake of rebuilding the metropolis fell into the hands of the Quinn Group. Just the initial estimate was that it could bring in a profit of $1 billion for the group. Luther was naturally jealous, but he was a high-tech group. He had no problem researching technology, but he had to stand aside when it came to building houses. And in the past 2 years, rebuilding Seaside City and Midway City, the Quinn Group's urban construction team was trained. A large number of skilled workers were hard work in itself, so it was useless for other groups to be jealous. After gaining a lot of reputation, the Quinn Group's new headquarters was officially built in the metropolis. The unlucky Luther gave up on the compensation. The original site of his group was forcibly requisitioned by the military because it was the crash site of the alien spaceship. He couldn't win against the military, so he had no choice but to gather his people and choose the site to rebuild Building L. In a short time, the bustling metropolis could be renamed as a big construction site because there were more excavators than cars in the city. That evening, Thea avoided everyone's gaze and changed into a yellow light costume alone. She went to a hidden corner in the city. Death Knell, what's the matter? The burly Death Knell walked out from the shadows. His originally burly body was now transformed by the energy of the light ring, making him as strong as a brown bear. Boss, someone issued a high-reward mission in the underground world. Death Knell was hesitant, but he still said it. I won't interfere with your mission. I remember I told you before. Death Knell organized his words and said cautiously, according to my principles, I will accept it. But personally, I am very against it. Death Knell, who valued money more than his life, was there a mission that he didn't want to accept? Thea's curiosity was piqued. What mission? Threaten a rich man who has been in the limelight recently. In the limelight? Thea made some connections, and with Death Knell's personally against it, she seemed to have guessed something. What's the name of the rich man? Death Knell gritted his teeth, but the hinting technique made him choose to obey. Quinn Merlin Group's new chairman, Thea Quinn. As if he was afraid that Thea would accept the mission, he quickly added, I have a good relationship with her brother. I don't really want to do this mission. F*CK, F*CK, F*CK. Thea could only rely on this to express her dissatisfaction. She wasn't sure if Luther was the one who did this, but it was definitely one of the few people who were jealous of her getting the big cake. Moreover, She actually heard this news from Death Knell. This was too melodramatic. She thought carefully about Death Knell's description. Threaten? The other party seemed to have some scruples as they didn't issue any mission with a bounty. Luther's chances of success increased by 20%. Thea knew that she had to reveal her true identity. She asked Death Knell softly, "Do you know who I am?" Death Knell was a little confused. Why did the topic change? The jump was too big. After thinking carefully, he shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Thea took off her mask and looked at him speechlessly. "I am Thea Quinn." Chapter 357. Ha! Death Knell felt like a crow had just flown over his head. He was stunned for a long time before he realized that his hearing wasn't faulty. He then glanced at Thea's face. That's right. She looked exactly the same as the one that appeared in the news. After Thea's heroic act of saving the citizens of Metropolis City was exposed, the number of people who knew her increased at an alarming rate. Her picture appeared in many newspapers, magazines, and online media. "You're Olivier's sister?" Death Knell asked with uncertainty. Thea nodded. "That's right." Death Knell didn't say anything. He lowered his head and fell into deep thought. What did Olivier say about his sister back then? Kind, cute, obedient, naive and pure? He couldn't help but tilt his head to look at Thea. This witch in front of him has nothing to do with any of those words, right? He recalled Olivier's vow to protect his family and his sister. But does this guy really need you to protect him? Even if the earth exploded in the next second, she would still be able to survive. The experienced Death Knell couldn't help but think deeper. Olivier definitely didn't know about his sister's abilities. Compared to Thea, who hid her abilities well, Olivier was as innocent as a little bunny who wandered alone on a deserted island while Thea inherited the family business. Is there some kind of inside story? Thea didn't know about Death Knell's wild thoughts. Since she had shown her true colors, there were some things that she could tell Death Knell. She said half-truthfully, "That day, I went to Purgatory Island to look for you guys. Unfortunately, I was delayed by something. When I returned to the island, you guys had already left." Ha! The amount of information he received in a short period of time was a little too much. Death Knell's sharp mind spun a few times before he understood. The one in red on Purgatory Island that day was you. You're the one who took Shadow away. In his anger, Death Knell's suggestion spell almost failed to suppress his emotions. He was halfway through drawing his sword, but his consciousness was still affected by the spell and automatically calmed down. What's wrong? Are you still thinking about Shadow? Your daughter is about the same age as Shadow, right? Thea sneered. Humph. Death Knell harumphed. Now that he had calmed down and thought about it, Shadow was just a beautiful object in his heart. It was completely due to his male desire to monopolize her. It was a far cry from love. If Thea hadn't mentioned her today, he would have forgotten about her. The two of them quickly brushed past the past and focused on the present. Death Knell might look like a burly man, but he was actually very intelligent. A few thoughts flashed through his mind, and together with Thea revealing her identity, he immediately thought of many things. You're competing with Luther? Do you suspect that he hired someone from the underground world? Death Knell had seen too many of the methods of these rich people, so it did not take much effort for him to guess the answer. The chances of it being Luther are higher, but it could also be someone else. She did not care about any threats. The weapons on Earth had almost no effect on her. Her only weakness was her family. If she went all out, no matter how high Luther's IQ was, he would not be able to withstand a single blow from her. I know Lex Luthor. He's too smart. Even if you have superpowers, you can't underestimate him. Don't worry, I can roughly guess Luther's mentality. His intelligence made him who he is, but it will also destroy him. He's too arrogant, thinking that he can control everyone's fate. Humph, it's just because I stole his limelight. In a few days, he'll find his nemesis. Thea's words were a little confusing. Death Knell did not fully understand, but he was not the type to get to the bottom of things. What do you need me to do? Infiltrate his inner circle and pass on a message? You don't have to do it deliberately. Let nature take its course. Luther doesn't trust anyone, so there's no need to waste your time. Your mission is to continue to take root in the underground world and understand all the dark corners of this world. Thea finished and thought for a moment. You can accept the mission to kidnap me. Just pretend to fight. As for Luther's side, use other channels to issue a mission, regardless of life or death. These rich people have nothing better to do. They just want to put on a show for others to see. As a mercenary, Death Knell was a little dissatisfied with this matter, but he still agreed. On the third day after the two ended their conversation, Thea was attacked. A few days later, she was attacked twice in a row. During the third attack, Death Knell personally took action, but he was repelled by Digger, who was armed with a simple frost gun. Thea was attacked, but Luther's side did not have it easy either. Within a week, he was attacked by gunmen 4 times. The last time, the mercenary Death Archer, who fought alongside Thea against the Charm Witch, could not resist the temptation of money and personally took action. He shot Luther's long hair from a distance, but the bullet was blocked by a layer of transparent energy shield. Subsequently, the underground world removed these 2 missions at the same time. Both of them revealed some technological equipment. As for whether it was active or passive, only they knew. Just as Thea predicted, Luther quickly shifted his attention. Ordinary business battles did not have much interest in him. He had his eyes on the superhero who had recently risen in the metropolis, Superman. This pair of old enemies still had the fate of going against each other. Because of the battle between Superman and Zod, where the spaceship destroyed his iconic building, the conceited Luther was jealous, dissatisfied, fearful, and other emotions mixed with hatred. As for Thea, because she was too busy, some people sent her a signal to stop, and she obediently withdrew the bounty. She spent the extra energy on studying the Kryptonian genetic modulation map. The data was extensive and profound. In the movie, Luther secretly used Zod's corpse to create Doomsday. This was simply nonsense. The probability of finding information on the super-biological cells invented by the ancient Kryptonian scientists in such a huge amount of data was less than 1 in a billion. Thea was clearly looking for information on Doomsday. Gideon worked with the supercomputer and searched for 2 days before he found it in an inconspicuous corner. Luther was very smart and had the so-called level 9 intelligence, but this referred to his IQ. In terms of pure computing power, he could never catch up to an artificial intelligence. It was obvious that someone of a higher level had interfered with his judgment. The mastermind behind this, if there were no surprises, was Dawnstar Darkseid's uncle, the Wasteland Wolf. The other party definitely did not teach Luther the knowledge of Doomsday just because he was a complete celestial being. There was a lot of inside information. Thea could not see the other party's intention at the moment. She could defeat mortals, but she was a little weak in the eyes of the new gods. She needed to plan ahead. Kill Luther directly? First of all, Luther was not easy to kill. Second, if Luther died there would be others. There was a company of mad scientists on Earth. What was to come would come, and it would not stop because of one person's life or death. Thea did not want to run away. She wanted to see how strong these new gods were. She ordered Gideon to bring up all the information on Doomsday. She wanted to study it carefully to see if there were any flaws, and if she could even take Doomsday for her own use. Chapter 358. No, it's still not working. Thea flipped through the records of Doomsday from the past tens of thousands of years on Krypton. Countless scientists had tried to control Doomsday and make this biochemical weapon their own. Genetic modification, cell manipulation, targeted therapy. Some methods that Thea could think of and some that she had never seen before had been tested on Doomsday one by one. But all these attempts failed without exception. The scientists did not dare to let Doomsday's cells grow, so they had no choice but to seal off the Phantom Zone. Doomsday had been resurrected twice over the past tens of thousands of years. Although the Kryptonians did not have the power of Superman, they still found Doomsday's weakness, which was his fear of kryptonite. Both times, Doomsday was defeated by the sheer number of Kryptonians. The ancient Kryptonian god, Rao, once left a prophecy that Doomsday would return to the world. In order to prevent the recurrence of the disaster, the Kryptonian Supreme Council originally planned to destroy all the data. But in order to preserve the information of Doomsday for future generations, they finally chose to seal it. There were 3 conditions to resurrect Doomsday: Doomsday's cells, Kryptonian corpses, and Kryptonian genetic modification technology. Now, Doomsday's cells were brought out by Zod, who was exiled to the Phantom Zone. Besides General Zod, there were 4 more Kryptonian corpses than in the original timeline. When the spaceship exploded, there might be some corpses that were blown up, so it was hard to count. Thea had all the genetic modification technology in her hands. When she first read the data, She was very rough. It was more like cutting than copying. Plus, the spaceship had crashed. At best, only 10% of the data was left for the military. Even this 10% was incomplete. Some of the data had conclusions but no derivation process, and some had reasons but no results. It was difficult for the scientists on Earth to derive anything from these incomplete data. Thea had tried to participate in the research of extraterrestrial technology, but the military's intention was obvious. They would only allow outsiders like Thea and Luther to participate if they could not find anything. As for Superman, he wanted to participate? He would wait until all the people on Earth were dead. Everything was back on track, and the citizens of the metropolis had recovered from the shock. The official data was that thousands of people were killed, but Thea was in charge of the medical cabin. According to the most conservative estimate, the death toll was no less than 5,000, and tens of thousands of people were missing. However, this was all Superman's fault and had nothing to do with her. She would rush to the alien planet every few days to modify Fiora's memory to the final stage. In the beginning, everything went smoothly. The image of General Zod gradually became an elder in Fiora's heart, a relative. Subconsciously, she did not reject this kind of scene. However, when it came to the change of allegiance, Thea felt a strong resistance. Fiora's recognition of her was really low. Thea refused to admit defeat and continued to increase her magic output. She had to convince her. Fiora, who was unconscious on the first day, subconsciously lost her loyalty and was filled with confusion. Thea took advantage of the situation, and the effect was remarkable. However, there was a sudden change on the second day. Fiora's allegiance was forcibly conjured up in her mind, and it was none other than Thea's old acquaintance, Clark Kent. Damn. Do you know each other? You should pledge your loyalty to him. In the original spacetime, you had at least fought with him once, but in this world, Fiora had only met him once when Superman surrendered. The two of them weren't familiar with each other at all. She had painstakingly spent half a day to train someone else's underling? Thea was not so selfless. Her magic continued to pour in. On the third day, something even more devastating happened. Perhaps Fiora really did not have a deep impression of Superman, and the idea of pledging her loyalty came and went quickly. However, there was an inexplicable mission to continue Krypton in her mind. It sounded great and noble, but Fiora's subconscious thought was that the way to continue Krypton's mission was to give birth to babies for Superman. Thea directly spat out a mouthful of old blood. Just thinking of the image made her irritated. She might as well pledge her loyalty to Superman. In desperation, Thea could only wake Fiora up. In order to get her wholeheartedly support, she had to break her original worldview. It was too easy to break the worldview of the Earthlings. She just had to drag them to another planet. Although it was more troublesome to deal with this Kryptonian, there were still ways. Where is this? Thea withdrew her magic from Fiora's mind. The Kryptonian's powerful self-healing ability kicked in. She quickly sat up and looked at the purple sky outside the house. She asked with uncertainty. If Krypton and Earth are in the south of the universe, this is the west. It's a planet in Sector 1125. With the speed of your Kryptonian spaceship, you can return home in about 812 years. Thea replied with her arms crossed. It was good news that the Kryptonian spaceship did not start a war. General and the others? Fiora's voice returned to normal, as if she was asking about something unrelated to her. General Zod was a true warrior. He was born on the battlefield, and he died on the battlefield. Thea had been studying Kryptonian genetic modification recently. The information revealed between the lines gave her some understanding of Kryptonian customs. For someone like Zod, who was born a warrior, dying on the battlefield was definitely more honorable than dying at home. Especially since he was of the same generation as Superman's father. He was not young anymore. The destruction of the planet and the continuation of his race weighed heavily on his mind. It was not a bad thing for him to die on the battlefield. Is that so? He died on the battlefield. Fiora was silent for a while. You want me to be loyal to you? Sorry, I don't see that you have the ability to help me restore the glory of Krypton. You can kill me, but I will not be loyal to you. Hee hee, Fiora, I once said that you are short-sighted. My words are still true. You don't understand the true nature of this world. Do you want to see it? Thea said with a faint smile, like a tempting demon. Fiora was actually hooked by her words. The true nature of the world. It sounded very high and mighty, but where was this thing? Could she see it? I want to see it. I have also sailed in the universe for many years and conquered countless planets. You are the most boastful person I have ever met. Fiora looked at her seriously after she finished speaking. Let's go to space. She took the lead and walked out. Fiora thought for a while and followed her. When the two of them reached space, Thea immediately opened a wormhole and started a long-distance journey with Fiora. When they crossed the 16th wormhole, the surroundings were dead silent. It was as if they had walked into the desert of civilization. There were no more intelligent planets and no signs of life. Fiora could not hold it in any longer. Where are you taking me? The end of the world, the edge of the universe. The continuous large-scale long-distance warping consumed a lot of energy from her light ring. She had never been to this area before. There was only a void around them. Only her yellow light ring could emit some light, allowing the two of them to see each other. Chapter 359. The End of the World? Fiora's head was full of question marks. Wasn't this a philosophical concept? Did the universe really have an end? Curiosity killed the cat. Fiora felt that if she continued to follow Thea, she might be able to see something unimaginable. This Earthling's knowledge was beyond all the Kryptonian scholars she knew. Let's keep going. Thea saw her hesitation and did not explain further. She opened a wormhole and continued to follow the coordinates in her mind. Yes, she was going to take Fiora to see the Wall of Origin, the boundary of the universe. If Thea could maintain a complete worldview after seeing the Wall of Origin, she could only say that she was impressed. During the battle with the Parallax Demon, as the first person in the world to wear a dual-color light ring, the light ring showed Thea the existence of the Wall of Origin and left a unique coordinate. Otherwise, she would not be able to find it even if she searched until the end of time. When the wormhole jumped for the 33rd time, Thea was so tired that she could not speak. Are you okay? Fiora asked. Her tone was a little hesitant. She was not worried about Sia, but she was afraid that if Sia died, she would not be able to return. Fiora did not have much knowledge about space, but she knew that her location was probably beyond the limit of the universe described by the Kryptonian scholars. Kryptonians could survive in the universe, but if something happened to Thea, she would not be able to fly back even if she was exhausted. We'll be there soon. Thea pretended to be calm, but in fact, she was cursing in her heart. This time, she was a little too arrogant because the journey was much further than she had imagined. She had planned to bring Diana here next time, but now she had to give up. If there was nothing else, she would rather die than come here again. At first, Thea was worried that she would be discovered by Yojia Khan, who was glued to the wall. He was a fierce man who could scare Darkseid into peeing his pants. If he had not insisted on sticking to the Wall of Origin, no one in the entire universe would be able to defeat him. The light rings did not want the air of the emotional spectrum to go up against him. The coordinates they left for Thea were the few places where she would not be discovered. It was as if they were sneaking into the village to shoot at her. We're here. Thea panted as she spoke. Fiora was not in the mood to care about her anymore. What did she see? There was actually a wall of unknown height in the universe in the void? Fiora couldn't see where the boundary of the wall was even after using her eyesight. All she could see was a mysterious brilliance. All kinds of brilliance reflected each other's brilliance. It was really difficult to use words to describe the wonders here. This is the world boundary you mentioned? Fiora had to admit that she was stunned. If Krypton hadn't been destroyed, she wouldn't have been able to witness such a scene for the rest of her life. Thea rested for a while before carefully looking at it. It was also her first time here, and she found that it was countless times more sacred and solemn than she had imagined. Even though she was mentally prepared, she still felt incomparably shocked by the vast and distant sense of mystery. Facing Fiora's question, she cleared her throat and said, "This is the universe boundary I mentioned, the end of the world. The ancient scholars called it the Wall of Origin. Outside the wall is the source, and all the answers are there. The source of everything is there. Countless strong people have tried to pass through this wall to find the source, but without exception, they all failed. Those who failed would be stuck on the wall. Currently, there is an unparalleled strong person on the wall. We can't call him by his name directly. You only need to know that even the most powerful evil god in the universe would turn around and flee upon hearing his name. You can imagine how terrifying this place is. Then why did you bring me here?" Fiora couldn't see what the wall had to do with her. "It has nothing to do with you. But it has something to do with me. I'm still very weak now, but I want to go to the other side of the wall to see what the source is. If I can control the source, perhaps I can have the power to change cause and effect, change time, and turn non-existence into existence. Thea said softly. She didn't finish her sentence and hid the second half of her sentence. Perhaps if she could control these powers, she would be able to compete with those existences whose names couldn't be mentioned. Just thinking about it made her excited. Turning something that doesn't exist into something that exists? Fiora muttered in a low voice. That's right. On that day, perhaps Krypton could return to the universe again. Your parents and friends might still be waiting for you to return home like before you were destroyed. Thea didn't know if she had such an ability, but she wanted to draw a big picture first. Anyway, she was determined to reach the peak. If she were to die midway, then there would be nothing left to talk about. But what if she could succeed? What if she could really embark on the path of immortality? At that time, it wouldn't be difficult to restore Krypton. Fiora was completely stunned. She couldn't think of such an ingenious idea even in her dreams. She wanted to ask Thea if she was bragging, but the endless wall in front of her reminded her that Thea was indeed extraordinary. Seeing her hesitation, Thea decided to give her another dose of medicine. Do you know how Krypton was destroyed? Fiora didn't know why she suddenly asked this question, but she still answered, the core of the planet was destroyed, and the planet exploded. This is what we saw with our own eyes in the Phantom area. What you said is only one of the current mainstream views. Thea didn't give Fiora a chance to interrupt and continued. The Green Lanterns once went to the wreckage of the planet to investigate. There were traces of the advanced artificial intelligence Brainiac's activities at the scene. There were also many alien scientists who asserted that the entropy of Krypton was much higher than normal. This didn't seem like a natural reaction. Many people thought that it was man-made. This is also a view. And Thea told her about 5 to 6 reasons she knew about the destruction of Krypton. Seeing that Fiora was dumbfounded, she continued, do you understand? The genetic technology of Krypton has reached the point where it can threaten some strong people. The destruction of your planet is not simple. I can only say that there must be the answer you want to know in the source behind the wall. Thea reached out her hand. I'm still very weak now, but I really need your help. Fiora was struggling in her heart. The information she received in this quarter of an hour was more than the information she received in the previous 30 years. Did she know nothing? Facing Thea's hand, she was full of hesitation. Pledging loyalty to an outsider was simply unimaginable. But the glory of Krypton was restored, and she was full of expectations. How should she choose? Thea didn't urge her, but just raised her hand and waited for her response. Time passed by, and finally Fiora made up her mind. Her genes determined that she was an adjutant, and she could only be an adjutant. If there was no one to assist her, her life would be meaningless. This was a command that was deeply rooted in the genes, and she couldn't refuse. I promise you. The two of them shook hands with each other. Sia revealed a satisfied smile. Chapter 360. Thea was very happy that she had successfully subdued Fiora. This time, she did not use magic. Instead, she used facts and reason to convince others. This feeling of accomplishment was really intoxicating. Although Fiora's desire to revive Krypton played a decisive role, the deterrence of the Wall of Origin was also a factor. With the combination of several factors, Thea was able to persuade the Kryptonian adjutant to surrender. It's really not easy. Thea could not help but sigh. This Kryptonian lady was good at fighting and tanking. She was currently the most lacking strength in the small team. The next time they formed a team, there would finally be someone who could stand at the front and tank the monsters. Controlling skills were very powerful, but a team full of control types without any offensive skills would be too awkward. Now that they had found a powerful general, the team's dilemma was finally resolved. Especially this strengthening method, which was safe and pollution-free. As long as she basked in the sun, her strength would increase exponentially. There was no easier way to strengthen than the Kryptonians in the entire universe. As for once Fiora was out of control after strengthening, Thea was not very worried. Kryptonians could strengthen, and her own improvement speed was not slow either. Superman had stayed on Earth for 33 years to reach his current strength. Fiora would not be able to catch up with Thea even after basking in the sun for a year and a half. Coupled with the genetic modification of the Kryptonians, they were more straightforward. Like Superman, Supergirl, and Zod, they were the kind of people who did what they said and did. They were almost simple-minded people. From the perspective of the mind-playing game, 100 Kryptonians were no match for one Earthling. Thea did not stay too long near the Wall of Origin. After recovering a little strength, she began the journey back with Fiora. After a few twists and turns, Fiora heaved a sigh of relief when she saw the traces of a civilized planet again. Previously, she was afraid that Sia would die from exhaustion, but now that she saw traces of intelligent life, she was finally not so worried. What do you want to say? Thea had used up a lot of her strength and needed to stop and rest from time to time. She saw that Fiora was hesitating to say something. General's body. Can you help me get it? Fiora asked uncertainly. Don't worry, I've already gotten it back, Thea said, retrieving General Zod's corpse from her spatial ring. General Zod was the most important person to Fiora, and his death at the hands of Superman was considered a civil war among the Kryptonians. It would not cause much backlash. However, if his corpse was dissected by the Earthlings, Fiora would definitely not agree. Thus, Thea had long sought out the African minister to obtain the corpse. Earth scientists are more concerned about spaceships and don't care much about corpses. Thea also has the habit of sending alien corpses for burial, Aubin Sue in the green light incident. When the minister hears that she only wants a corpse, he agrees after thinking for a while. Zod's neck was broken by Superman, but there were no other wounds on his body. He lay quietly in the coffin as if he had fallen asleep. Fiora gently stroked Zod's coffin and remained silent for a long time. Where do you want to bury him? Thea asked after a while. Do you know the original coordinates of Krypton? Yes, Thea not only knew it, but also visited such a famous place with Diana. The two soon arrived at the place where Krypton exploded. The original planet was long gone, replaced by countless fragments of planets and space junk, which were scattered messily, indicating that there was once a strong civilization here. Thank you. Fiora found the largest fragment of the planet and buried General Zod on this piece of land. Then, she turned back and sincerely thanked Thea. What are you talking about? We are partners in the future. After solving all the problems, she returned to Earth with Fiora and found an empty house in Star City. Take off your helmet, Thea ordered domineeringly. Fiora was dumbfounded. After listening to Thea's explanation, she realized that she was going to be exposed to the sun. Although she was puzzled, she still took off her helmet. Ah! The first time she was exposed to the direct sunlight of the yellow sun, the Kryptonian cells in Fiora's body were activated by the sunlight, and a large amount of information flowed into her brain. Fiora only screamed once before she fainted. She knew it. From the first time she came into contact with the sunlight, it could be seen that Fiora's combat talent was far inferior to Zod's. Although Captain Zod was also dizzy from the sunlight, he was still conscious. He could still walk 2 steps with the help of others. Fiora, on the other hand, directly fainted. The difference was obvious. Sia conjured some tables and chairs, placed her properly, and waited for her to wake up. 2 hours later, Fiora slowly woke up, but his condition couldn't be described with just the word, bad. His eyes were blurred, and his voice was wavering. Only when Thea dragged her into a room made of pure lead did Fiora breathe a sigh of relief. What happened to me? Fiora asked weakly. You Kryptonians can increase your strength by absorbing the yellow sun, and there is no upper limit. This is a unique talent in the entire universe, Thea said enviously. Fiora did not have the strength to argue with her. She shook her head and did not want to talk. Ha! She did not know? Thea rubbed her chin and pondered. Finally, she realized that there was something wrong with the sequence. Fiora did not see the battle between Superman and Zod, so she did not realize how strong the Kryptonians were. This was easy. Thea pulled up the video of the battle from the satellite and showed it to Fiora. When she saw Zod flying in the sky and burrowing into the ground, and his eyes were emitting heat rays, Fiora was stunned. She looked back at Thea, who understood the situation, and hoped for further explanation. Thea pointed at the screen. This guy in blue tights and red cloak is the Carlair you are looking for. You have seen him before. He has lived on Earth for 33 years. Now, people on Earth call him Superman because he is so powerful. The one who fought with him is General Zod. He was in the same situation as you are now. He was directly exposed to the yellow sun, and that is why he has such earth-shattering power. You see, this is the real strength of the Kryptonians. As long as the yellow sun is not exhausted, your strength will increase without limit. Do you understand what this means? Thea asked. Fiora shook her head blankly, indicating that she did not know. If there are 1,000 or 100 Kryptonian warriors like you, no other race will survive. After knowing this, do you still think the destruction of Krypton was accidental? Thea asked Fiora seriously. Fiora was speechless. In this short span of a day, she had accepted too many things that she didn't know before. Her brain, which was originally considered sharp, was now a mess. She really didn't have much ability to think. Chapter 361. The Kryptonians' first exposure to sunlight was mainly due to receiving too much information in a short period of time, causing them to faint. After Fiora adapted to the environment and blocked out a large amount of useless information, the only thing left was feeling comfortable. Super senses, heat rays, freezing breath, super strength, speed, endurance, and that incredible super recovery ability. The two occasionally exchanged pointers. Thea had tried to attack Fiora with magic, but she was somewhat speechless because of their super recovery ability. Even if she used magic to control Fiora, it was useless. Warriors like Zod and Fiora, who had conquered countless planets, had strong willpower. Their magic could not be controlled for long, so it was difficult to cause fatal damage to them in this limited time. For example, the Kryptonians were the type of people who had a long HP bar and fast recovery ability. Without kryptonite to weaken them, it was impossible to kill them. Usually, after casting a bunch of spells, the damage received would be offset by their strong recovery ability. When the Kryptonians woke up, they would be fine. If there was no kryptonite in this world, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the Kryptonians were gods walking on the ground. After Fiora adapted to the new strength in her body, Thea took her to Korriga. This is your new subordinate? Thea and Sinisto met again. Both of them looked behind each other at the same time and were a little speechless. Sinisto's first two recruits were all normal people. Perhaps he felt that Thea's previous recruits, such as the dead people and the evil gorillas, were very different and cool. This time, he had also spent a lot of effort to find two subordinates with unique bones to compete with them. But he did not expect Thea to change her style and take the normal route this time. His original intention to compete with her was like a punch to the air. Thea looked at the two subordinates that Sinisto had recruited this time and could not help but sigh. The universe was so big that it was full of strange things. One of them was called Sludge, a cell-like creature. Its outer membrane was a corrosive liquid, and its insides contained the corpses of many enemies. Usually, it would lie on the ground in a green mass, but it could barely maintain a human form during battle. The other fellow was even scarier. It was a deadly virus that was usually as small as a speck of dust. According to Sinisto, this was a virus developed by a certain high-tech planet for war. They kept iterating on the virus and finally produced a supervirus with intelligence. It was the microbe in front of Thea. It named itself Dispersis. Your new subordinate is a Kryptonian? Are there any survivors after the destruction of Krypton? Sinisto originally thought that Fiora was an Earthling, but the light ring scan gave him a slight shock. He was actually a remnant of an extinct planet. In terms of rarity, he wasn't inferior to his subordinates. There were more and more feelings of fear in the universe, and the collection of yellow energy was also increasing. Sinisto had made a lot of light rings, so he didn't have to live so frugally like before. He threw a yellow ring to Fiora. The Kryptonians' technological weapons are very powerful, but their combat power is not high. I agree to let you join the Legion, but you have to show off your skills to my subordinates, Sinisto said sternly when he saw that the two of them were about to leave. Thea almost burst out laughing when she heard that. The Kryptonians' combat power is not high? That's because you don't understand the body structure of the Kryptonians. Let leader Sinisto see the Kryptonians with low combat power. Thea signaled Fiora to show them his strength. Previously, Thea had told Fiora about their current situation of being harmonious on the surface, and Thea had also talked about her ambition to control the Yellow Lantern Legion. Fiora naturally knew what he needed to do. That was to intimidate. Only by suppressing everyone with absolute strength would he be able to take over the army after Sinisto. Thea allowed Fiora to join the Yellow Lantern Legion because the Yellow Lantern Legion had a function that was not very eye-catching: Kryptonian recharge. This function was meaningless to any other race, and only the Kryptonians could use it. What if the Kryptonians couldn't absorb sunlight during battle and their energy was depleted? Ring recharge. What if the kryptonite damaged their combat power and caused them to fall to the bottom? Ring recharge. The term perpetual motion machine was used to describe the Kryptonians who wore the yellow lantern ring. The only limitation was that they were born with great strength and had little resistance to fear. Thea could only make a magic ring for Fiora with the bones of Kamal, the shark god. She had cast a constant resistance to fear on the ring so that Fiora would not be affected by fear whenever he wore the yellow lantern ring. Fiora didn't wear the yellow lantern ring directly. Instead, he flew up on his own. Then, under Sinisto's puzzled gaze, he quickly landed and punched the ground. Boom! The ground within a radius of dozens of miles shook violently, and a crater 100 meters deep and 1,000 meters in diameter appeared on the ground directly under her attack. Are you kidding me? Sinisto was a little confused. How could this woman have such great strength? If he hadn't prepared beforehand, he wouldn't have been able to withstand this punch. After all, without the power of the yellow lantern ring, he was just an alien with a strong will. He didn't have any supernatural abilities. He had received Sinisto's order to compete with the newcomers brought by Thea. Now that he saw Fiora's powerful punch, the guy called Sludge naturally wriggled backward. As for the supervirus, it hid. Thea searched for it with the Eye of Horus for a long time before she found that the guy ran faster than Sludge. Fiora didn't stop. She flew up into the sky again. Her eyes were scarlet, and the heat rays in her eyes were shot at the mountain not far away. The heat rays hit the mountain with a sizzling sound. When the smoke and dust dispersed, the symbol of the Yellow Lantern Corps was engraved on the mountain. Well, not bad. Thea cheered for her own people loudly. She cast a fluorescent spell, and the symbol on the mountain emitted a yellow light. From afar, it looked like a sacred place. Well, not bad, not bad. Sinisto praised insincerely. After seeing the two of them leave, Korriga heaved a sigh of relief. He was originally determined to rebel, but now he couldn't help but hesitate. To be honest, he was really surprised that an unknown Kryptonian could be so powerful. Could there be a stronger race in the universe? Those people didn't need any emotional energy and could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground with their own strength? Everything now had Green Lantern in front of him. If Green Lantern was killed, the task of maintaining the order of the universe would fall on him. Sinisto was a little hesitant. If 100 or 80 Kryptonians like the one just now came, how could he resist? He had seen the performance of his subordinates. They ran very fast. If he relied on them, he wouldn't even know how he died. It seemed that the rebellion would have to be delayed. Sinisto couldn't help but think that he needed a few loyal subordinates. Chapter 362. Thea did not know that Fiora's strong performance had made Sinisto cautious for a while. On the way, she tested Fiora's concretions. The Kryptonian adjutant's imagination was much better than Groot's, but most of her concretions were technological weapons. It could only be said that her own strength was far beyond the ability of the concretions. The light ring only provided her with energy to recover. Relying on the power of emotions to replenish the energy lost in the battle was a fantasy in Fiora's eyes a few days ago. But these days, her worldview was so shattered that she silently accepted this unscientific explanation. When the two returned to Earth, Thea did not arrange a job for her. She just told her to adapt to life on Earth first. Fiora could absorb the yellow sun every day and see her strength growing. She was not dissatisfied with that. But soon, a problem arose. Superman had a super mind. He could learn all the medical books on Earth in 5 minutes and master the knowledge that others learned in 10 years. Fiora was not an omnipotent Superman. The adjutant's genetic modification allowed her to learn a little bit in all aspects. Compared to the Kryptonians of the same race, she was considered to have a strong learning ability. But compared to Superman, who gave birth naturally, there was a big gap. Thea drew a tube of blood from her. The needle was naturally made of kryptonite. In the original spaceship, in order to transform the Earth's climate, it was divided into 2 parts. The kryptonite was sunk in the Indian Ocean. Now the spaceship did not go anywhere. It crashed in the metropolis. The kryptonite exploded everywhere. Thea secretly collected a lot of it while saving people. Leaving Fiora to study alone, Thea rushed back to her laboratory. She had already obtained her master's degree. Now, she was studying for a doctorate in biological genetics. The blood of God was hard to find. It had always been Thea's wish to let Malcolm and Moira live healthy and happy lives. Of course, if she was in a good mood, she could also bring her 2 brothers along. Malcolm came and went like a shadow. Thea did not know if he was injected with the blood of God. But the effect of Moira's injection was immediate. She looked at least 20 years younger, and her skin regained its luster. At first, Moira was distressed and said that she used to wear makeup to look younger when she went out, but now she wore makeup to look older. Thea was not satisfied with this. Since magic could not solve the problem, she could only turn to science for help. Coincidentally, the genetic modification map of the Kryptonians had fallen into her hands. Naturally, she had to put in some effort in this aspect. Although she did not have a supermind like Superman, Thea's learning ability was far superior to Fiora's. Combined with the knowledge of Earth, the preliminary genetic optimization fluid had been configured. It was completely in line with Earth's technological environment. The Krypton Genetic Modification Atlas only provided her with a direction to advance. Thea didn't stop there. She needed Fiora's blood to extract a substance from the Krypton cells to create a super gene optimization fluid. Who is it? One day, when Thea entered her laboratory again, she found traces left behind by a stranger. Her laboratory was kept secret, and only a few of her closest friends knew the location. Thea turned on the light and saw a young woman in a wheelchair slowly sliding out from the side of the laboratory table. The young woman lowered her posture and said softly, "Miss Quinn, I'm here to ask for your help. Please help me." Thea did not say anything else because she knew this woman. She was Maisie Graves, Luther's secretary and bodyguard. Maisie Graves was seriously injured when the spaceship crashed. It was Superman who rescued her from the ruins. Thea's medical pod had saved her life. Was she trying to gain sympathy by acting like a weak woman now? Miss Maisie's temperament was as miserable as it could be, as if all the misfortunes in the world had fallen on her. If it was an idol drama, this woman would be the female lead. Unfortunately, Thea knew her battle record. She was someone who could fight with death knell. No matter how great the mental blow was, she would not be like this. Sensing that the atmosphere between them was a little tense, the secretary knew that her first trick had failed. She calmly put away her bitter face. After failing to gain sympathy, she began to talk about the current situation. "My legs are completely crippled. Mr. Luther said to amputate them and install mechanical legs. But I can't bear to part with these two legs." The secretary's words were hard to tell if she was lying or not. The tears hanging at the corner of her eyes flowed down completely. Thea glanced at her. Although it was still covered in scars, the lines of the secretary's legs were straight and beautiful after rigorous training. Combined with her appearance, it was indeed a pity to amputate such a pair of legs. Even though she knew that the secretary was up to no good, Thea could not help but ask, "Mr. Luther is an intelligent man. If he can't do anything, what's the use of me?" "Mr. Luther said that your medical pod must have a better version." "I believe him." The secretary's eyes were still shining, but from her tone of worship, it did not sound like Luther's words. It sounded more like the words of a god. Thea chuckled and pointed at her with her finger. "You worship your Mr. Luther so much? Why did you come to me for help? You should know that he is my competitor. He used a lot of tricks behind my back. Why should I help you?" As she spoke, Thea's tone became more and more severe. Her usual smile disappeared, and at this time, her eyes were filled with fear. The secretary persisted for 2 seconds before lowering her head. It was not that she was timid, but Thea's eyes were too scary. She avoided Thea's gaze, but the fear did not dissipate. The huge mental pressure almost made her collapse. However, since she was chosen by Luther, her quality was indeed far better than ordinary people. Her hands clasped the wheelchair handles tightly, and blood dripped from her lips. She did not beg for mercy. She just silently endured the mountain-like pressure in her mental world. Humph! Thea withdrew her mental deterrence. The secretary's willpower was extraordinary. According to Thea's observation, among the ordinary people who had not been strengthened, only Nightwing, Barbara, and a few others could reach this level. Even Laurel and Tommy might not be able to reach this level. Of course, Batman was not in the discussion. "You are indeed not an ordinary person. My judgment was right," the secretary said, panting. Of course, Thea would not admit it. "It's just a simple psychological hint." The secretary did not care about her explanation. "Mr. Luther used to consciously collect information on all the special people in the world. I am the one in charge of this work. This lady has been with you a lot in the past few years. After that, the secretary threw a large folder to Thea. Thea pulled out the first page, and what greeted her eyes was an old black and white photo. It was the photo of Diana in the village in Belgium, the one taken with Steve and the others after killing the German soldiers. Chapter 363. Good stuff. Thea looked around. She wasn't a photographer, so she couldn't tell if it was the original or not. The only pity was that she had scruples about the timeline. Otherwise, she would have taken a photo and given it to Diana today to reminisce about the past. Although the person in the photo was Steve, Thea didn't tear it up like in the TV series. After all, it was a memento. It would be a pity to tear it up. She took out a few more pieces of paper from the folder. Without exception, they were all shots of Diana in the city. Some were from the front and some were from the side. She also included a lot of records of the citizens that Diana had met. The secretary organized it very carefully. When she spoke, what she said, what her accent was, the climate at the time, the clothes she wore, etc. There were even a few photos of Thea. Although she was very careful, Diana didn't care. Thea didn't want to be like a thief on a date. At first, she tried to cover it up, but later, she just let her be. So it wasn't surprising that Luther's satellite could capture her. Miss Secretary, what can these things prove? Thea flipped through the papers. On the day of the battle with the Parallax Demon, the scene was surrounded by yellow fog. The world's satellites only captured some blurry figures. There was no real image at all. This was also the reason why Superman was called the first superhero. It was because the previous information was too fake. The battle between Superman and Zod was real and clear. The secretary couldn't figure out the details between Thea and Diana. She could only rely on the inherent impression. Personally, she felt that Thea might be stronger. She said vaguely, "Your female companion's appearance hasn't changed in 100 years. Is it because?" Thea looked at her watch. She was a little annoyed after talking nonsense with the secretary for half an hour. "Even if I can cure you, are you sure you can still gain Luther's trust?" It wasn't that Thea didn't think of bribing her, but it was just a thought. It was impossible that Luther wouldn't suspect her. The secretary's reaction was not beyond her expectations. Her voice was still calm, but there was a trace of sadness in her words. "I'm asking you for help. No matter what the result is, Mr. Luther will definitely not trust me." "Then why did you come looking for me? Are you crazy?" Thea sometimes felt that there was something wrong with the brains of all the heroes and villains in this world. Luther and the secretary in front of him looked like smart people, but one thought he was a god, and the other was paranoid to the extreme. Were there no normal brain circuits in the world? The atmosphere between them was a little tense. Just as Thea was about to kick her out, the secretary finally said, "Mr. Luther doesn't trust anyone, whether I ask for help or not." "I'm really impressed. Let's talk about business principles. How can you help me?" "Help you erase all the video data?" the secretary asked tentatively. Thea snorted. "Not enough. If she deleted the current ones, what about the future ones? There were so many satellites in the world. There must be others that could capture the two of them. This condition was too cheap. I'll work for you on the premise that I don't betray Mr. Luther." The secretary proposed a bargaining chip that she thought was rich enough. To be honest, Thea was not very satisfied with this condition, but after thinking for a moment, she agreed. "When Luther abandons you again, you can come to me. I'll take you to see the world that you don't understand. By then, you'll know how narrow-minded you are." It was the same familiar tone and the same familiar feeling. It was similar to the words used to fool Fiora. But for a native of Earth, there was no need to take her to visit the Wall of Origin. Otherwise, if she brought 100 people to watch every day, the con on the wall would jump down and kill her. What Thea valued was not her power, but the emotional power contained in her body. Miss Mercy Graves, just like her name, had a power that she didn't realize. It was a matter of knowledge. No matter how smart Luther was, he didn't realize what kind of power his assistant had. Like the Yellow Lantern's fear and the Green Lantern's courage, compassion was a necessary emotion for the Green Lantern Corps. They were originally a Lantern Ring tribe secretly established by Aubin Sioux. The star field where they were located was unknown to outsiders. They didn't show their true colors until the Dark Night. However, Aubin Sioux's ring recorded the coordinates of this star field. Later, he passed the ring to Hal Jordan. Coincidentally, Thea also wore the same ring. Hal Jordan couldn't see what the lone coordinate represented, but Thea knew that it must be the base of the Green Lantern Corps. The secretary was still far from being truly loyal. Only after being abandoned again could she change the target of her compassion. Only then could she truly be used by Thea. Thea invested in the present for Death Bell, Poison Ivy, and the others. As for the secretary, she invested in the future. With a snap of her left hand, the secretary couldn't resist the impact of her consciousness and fainted. It wasn't difficult to cure her disability. As Luther expected, Thea had a large number of advanced medical pods. Thea used her X-ray vision to check her body and confirmed that there was no tracking device. Only then did she bring the unconscious secretary to the metropolis through a portal. Death Bell bought an island in the middle of a lake on the outskirts of the metropolis. There was a magically controlled Shark King in the lake. With the support of Thea's large amount of funds and advanced weapons, Death Bell now had more than 100 subordinates. Each of them had excellent tactics and tenacious willpower. It was effortless to send them out to assassinate the chiefs and generals of small countries. "Boss? That's rare. Who's the one behind you?" The one who greeted Thea with a smile was Poison Ivy. Now, Thea's subordinates addressed her indiscriminately. Some called her boss, and some called her general like Fiora. Thea didn't care. She could call her whatever she wanted. Thea wrapped the secretary with her spiritual energy. There were too many metals in her wheelchair, so Thea threw her in Star City. This woman used the third medical pod. After the treatment, knock her out and send her back to the Luther group. Thea opened the door and went back to Star City. She hadn't finished her experiment for the day. Ayaya, what a pretty lady. Tiescase. Poison Ivy was a biochemistry graduate after all, so she was more educated than Death Knell and the other mercenaries. She was in charge of a few medical cabins that weren't on the market. Even though Poison Ivy hadn't done anything earth-shattering yet, she was already quite famous in the mercenary industry. She carried out Thea's orders thoroughly. She controlled the plant and pulled the secretary into a special room. The plant's poison had subtly changed her body and personality. She didn't even realize that she was a completely different person from before. She looked left and right to make sure that no one was looking at her. She took off the secretary's clothes. Even if someone asked, she would use the excuse of checking her injuries. As for whether it was true or not, only God knew. Chapter 364. The next day, when the secretary woke up, she found that she had returned to her residence. Her wheelchair was beside the bed. She moved her toes nervously and found that the familiar feeling had returned. She turned over and sat up. The harsh training had restored her calmness. If it weren't for the clothes on her body, she would have suspected that yesterday's experience was a dream. Hiss. After standing up, she found that her lower body was a little sore. She reached out and touched it. There were obviously some indescribable traces. Thinking of the relationship between Thea and Diana, she couldn't help but think more. Although it felt a little strange, she was still very excited that her body had regained the ability to move. She tried to take a few deep breaths to restore her calmness. Only then did she dress up and go to work at the Luther group. Lex Luthor acted as if he didn't see her amputated leg yesterday, but she could walk as usual today. He continued to instruct her to do her work as usual, and then waved his hand to dismiss her. The secretary, who was originally a little excited, felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her head. The joy in her heart disappeared, and only bitterness and grief remained. On the African prairie, in a wooden house in Ethiopia that didn't communicate with the outside world, the house was filled with a tempting fragrance. Thea and Diana had a very long practice, with a warm and tense atmosphere. The effect of magic to transform the body was not as good as divine power, but it was more or less. Recently, Thea had been violently absorbing sunlight and moonlight. Her physical level was rapidly catching up with Diana. At this time, the practice could go back and forth for a few rounds. "Is there any problem with the daily management of the temple?" Diana stood up and gracefully wrapped her body with a bath towel. She asked Thea, who was combing her hair. "Well, the Isadora you recommended is indeed a fanatical believer of the moon goddess. Under her leadership, many nearby citizens have a shallow level of faith. I can even absorb the power of faith from the temple. I think the situation with the moon goddess will be much better." Thea was very happy to mention this. Initially, with the addition of the water element to her body, Thea's overall magic power had decreased a little in order to balance the various elements. But with the reconstruction of the Temple of Artemis, the statue that Thea left on Paradise Island had transmitted a lot of faith power to her through some unknown attraction. This power of faith was provided by the Amazon female warriors in the past 100 years. The amount of faith was not much, but it was pure enough. The power of faith had been converted into divine power, and then into magic power, greatly making up for the previous deficiency. Her overall magic power had even increased by a notch. Now, Thea's 5 elemental magic powers were operating more flexibly and naturally. As long as she could find more earth element magic to add to her body, she would be able to form a perfect cycle in her body. Light, darkness, earth, fire, water, and wind elements would circulate. It would be an exaggeration to say that she would have an endless cycle, but her endurance would increase to an unimaginable level. Isadora is a member of Mother's personal guard. She has rich combat skills and is devout in her faith. I think it would be foolproof to have her in charge of the temple. Diana was generous with her praise for the person she recommended. Thea did not speak. At first, the temple was just to attract Diana's attention. Later on, Thea basically did not care about it. Everything was done by Bruce Wayne. He must have worked so hard to return the favor. Looking through the information provided by the secretary, Diana sighed when she saw the old photos. Just as she was about to speak, she sensed something and said sternly, "Someone is coming and it's very fast." Thea looked outside the door and said softly, "Amanda, how did this guy find this place?" They looked at each other, a little confused. Fortunately, Amanda came quickly and pushed the door open and walked into the wooden house alone. "It's not easy to find you." Amanda's tone was calm, without the slightest hint of panic. She chose to ignore the fact that they were only wrapped in bath towels, their shining long legs, and their flushed faces. "You've been running all over the world. I've mobilized 30 satellites and 2 action simulation analysis teams to find you." Thea nodded. She did not want to hide her relationship with Diana from anyone. She knew what she should know and would never know what she should not know. She was just curious about why Amanda was looking for her. "Amanda, we met 3 days ago. I even congratulated you for becoming the leader of the Heaven's Eye Society." The Minister of Defense had just gained a foothold. Amanda had joined the Minister of Defense very quickly. With the help of the last Charm Witch incident, she had finally succeeded in becoming an official. The second-in-command had become the boss, and the boss had become the second-in-command. She had swapped positions with Steve Trevor, going from a subordinate to a leader. Thea was a little confused. She should be very busy now. It was not her style to be in such a hurry to block the door. Amanda smiled faintly. "I'm not looking for you. I'm looking for Miss Prince." "Looking for me?" Diana's beautiful eyebrows frowned. In this time and space, she did not have Steve's shackles. She had nothing to do with the Heaven's Eye Society. Why would they look for her? Amanda did not intend to play games with them. 9 hours ago, there was a thief in the Black House. The thief was your friend, the archaeologist Minerva. She stole a dagger of unknown origin. Panther Lady. The name instantly came to Thea's mind. In the original time and space, Panther Lady used Diana's relationship to enter the Black House and stole the God-Slayer blade that was possessed by the Cheetah God. After that, she used the dagger to stab herself in the chest and became the supervillain Panther Lady. But in this time and space, their relationship was just ordinary. Diana did not have too many entanglements with the Heaven's Eye Society. Panther Lady still stole the God-Slayer blade as before. In the later stage, Panther Lady could scratch the running Flash, bite through Superman's skin and infect Superman. All signs showed that this guy was not simply possessed. She might have been directly possessed by the Cheetah God. Otherwise, how could an ordinary person be so powerful after being corrupted? This was too exaggerated. The surveillance video shows that she's extremely fast now. We've been tracking her for 5 hours and she disappeared into the crowd. But in the places she passed by, many people were infected and turned into walking corpses under her control. "I need your help." Amanda took out her tablet and showed a few photos of the infected. Thea looked at it. Since it involved Diana, she could not ignore it even if she wanted to. This guy was obviously an evil woman who had lost her virginity. Just shoot her to death. She took out the divine longbow from the dimensional ring and turned to ask Amanda, where was she last seen? Amanda was a little puzzled. Why did you take out the bow and arrow? How far away was that person from here? Amanda did not know that Thea had the ability to snipe from a very long distance, but Diana did. She hurriedly pressed Thea's arm. She's not a bad person. We should try to save her. Chapter 365. Thea gritted her teeth. Heroes of justice were too unlikable. They were stubborn and stubborn. These were all words used to describe them. The principle of not killing had allowed many criminals to escape with their lives. After that, they would break out of prison and continue to do evil. It was a cycle. However, she couldn't ignore Diana's emotions. She could only put away her bow and lead Diana around to let her realize the leopard lady's evil. When the time came, she would shoot her to death with an arrow. Thea was a little depressed as her vacation plan was ruined. She reached out her hand to Amanda. Give me all the information. Whether she's alive or dead, we'll take care of her. Amanda smiled happily. It's best if she's alive. If you catch her alive, I'll return you a huge favor. A huge favor? Thea's eyes rolled twice as she thought quickly. If she wasn't wrong, she was talking about Oliver. Using something she knew as a huge favor made Thea's heart sour. However, Amanda really didn't know that she knew. Overall, she was still very sincere. In the original spacetime, Oliver had mysteriously escaped from Amanda's control in the 5th year before he returned to Star City. Presumably, it was because of this huge favor? On one side was her lover, and on the other was her brother. Even if Thea was 120% unwilling, she had to make this trip. She even had to capture her alive in exchange for Amanda's huge favor. The two of them ignored Amanda. She could go back the way she came. Thea directly opened a portal and rushed to the place where the leopard lady last disappeared. It was a dense forest in Louisiana. They weren't Special Forces scouts and didn't know how to observe footsteps. However, Thea's eye of Horus could see very far. She hovered in the air and observed with rapt attention. There are a few people over there who are staggering. They seem to be the infected that Amanda mentioned. Thea pointed to the northeast and the two of them quickly flew over. Tell me, where did Minerva go? Diana was also a little depressed. She was pulled to do this during a sparring break. Naturally, she was a little angry. When he saw an infected person, he threw out the truth lasso and asked loudly. Half of the infected's face was covered with bruises, and their eyes were white. The canine teeth in their mouths were obviously longer than those of ordinary humans. They seemed to have sensed the signs of life of the two girls, and they turned their heads. Their movements were obviously very slow, but they accelerated extremely fast. In less than 0.1 seconds, they completed a series of movements such as turning around, bending their knees, and pouncing. Thea knew that the Panther Lady was extremely fast and that her attacks were infectious. She had already changed her combat equipment with Diana in advance. The Panther Lady's pouncing speed was extremely fast in the eyes of ordinary people, but in their eyes, it was nothing much. With a flying kick, the force of several hundred tons landed directly on the leader of the infected. The other party crashed into more than 10 trees before falling to the ground. What came out of his mouth was not blood, but some kind of black sticky substance. They're not human anymore, Diana said a little uncomfortably as she faced several infected people flying over. However, her hands were not slow. The two of them had sparring on the weekend. If Thea improved, she would naturally benefit as well. The growth in her body was not obvious, but Diana's resistance to fear had now reached an inhuman level. At least, it was much higher than when the two girls reunited. The increase in her resistance also increased her willpower, which was reflected in her abnormal calmness in battle. No matter what kind of unfavorable situation she was facing, Diana could easily deal with it. She used the least amount of strength to throw out the most fatal punch. Her attacking style was unknowingly influenced by Thea. Fatal, efficient, and simple. This was Diana's current fighting style. Compared to the unskillful shield bashing of 100 years ago, her current fighting style was more artistic. Thea cooperated with her and drew her divine longbow. The two of them, one in close combat and one in long range, cooperated seamlessly. After 30 seconds, over 100 infected people were all knocked down by the two of them. Black sticky substance flowed out of the infected people's wounds and gathered into a dirty river. It smells so bad. Thea, who was a little obsessed with cleanliness, could not stand it. She directly used Magician's hand and gathered a bunch of people who were either dead or alive. The freezing gun on the power armor froze the bodies, and the pungent stench was finally contained. What should they do next? Diana automatically looked at Thea. Just like the day when they left Paradise Island, Thea did not disappoint her. The secondary control system on her arm was connected to the main frame of the Quinn group, and a large amount of information was analyzed and summarized. Combined with the simple clues given by Amanda at the beginning, Thea determined the next step. Minerva was originally adopted by a woman named Letta in Idaho. This woman seems to be running a religious school. Let's go there and see if there are any clues. Diana had no objections, and the two continued to fly northwest. The other party's school was built in an extremely remote area, surrounded by mountains. Many local people's faces changed drastically when they talked about this school, and all of them kept their mouths shut. Sia finally got the detailed address from an old man with fear and hints. Since they were looking for clues, the two naturally would not fly there. Instead, they changed into casual clothes and drove a jeep. The two sitting in the jeep looked like adventure enthusiasts going out for a vacation. Stop! This is our private property. The two women drove to a wooden fence, and a fierce woman with a submachine gun stopped their car. When it was time to show off her acting skills, it was usually Thea who went up to talk, and this time was no exception. Thea talked nonsense like a river, saying things like lost tourists and public-spirited female university students. She said all sorts of harmless things, but the fierce woman guarding the gate believed her. She opened the gate to Thea's enthusiastic thanks. After entering the wooden fence, he realized that the space inside was not small. The people who lived here were all women. Some were young, some were old, and some were young. The color of their hair and pupils were all different. The only exception was their clothes. They were all made of rough linen. The children carried baskets, the adult women carried all kinds of tools, and only a few fierce women carried rifles in their hands. Other than the few rifles, Thea did not see any modern equipment. These women lived in the 21st century as if they were in the Middle Ages. However, she did not look at them for long. Thea's eyes were automatically attracted to a statue standing in the square. A young girl with antlers and a bow and arrow. Thea looked at Diana and found that she was also looking at her. It was unbelievable. This statue was a statue of Artemis. In other words, this group of people climbed mountains and waded through rivers to America to worship an ancient Greek god. That's not right. After all, Thea was a chosen. Her perception of the goddess was higher than Diana's. She quickly found the problem. This statue did not have a trace of holy power. Combined with the ascetic attire of the surrounding people, it was not that they were not devout, but that there was something else going on. Chapter 366. Sia carefully observed the expressions of the women around her. Pain, numbness mixed with cruelty. All kinds of emotions were mixed together, and it was difficult to determine their true feelings. The only thing she could be sure of was that they were not happy. This was not in line with the teachings of the moon goddess. Her teachings were cheerful girls in the forest. These people in front of her were far from cheerful. What should we do? Diana gave Thea a small look. The question was obvious. Thea shook her head slightly. She had already sensed the fluctuation of divine power. Although it was weak, the evil in the aura was obvious. On the surface, this place was worshipping the moon goddess. What kind of evil god was actually worshipped? Only the leaders knew. Ms. Letta, which god are you worshipping in the middle of the square? Aren't you Christians? Thea asked the old woman who was the leader. She had introduced herself earlier. She was the nominal organizer of this school, Panther Girl Minerva's adoptive mother. The old woman pretended to be kind, but when her lips parted slightly, her two canine teeth flashed under the moonlight. We are an ancient race. People call us the Amazons. As for what we worship, it's the moon and the goddess of the hunt. F***CK. Do you have any shame? Thea's expression was obviously suspicious, but her excellent acting skills quickly turned this suspicion into shock. Her shock was fake, but Diana's shock was real. Diana, who had been pretending to be expressionless, could not help but observe the old woman from head to toe. Unfortunately, she could not find a trace of the old woman's aura that was compatible with Paradise Island. When the fake Li Gue met the real Li Gue, Sia didn't know what to say to these imposters. She could only open her mouth wide to express her shock. The old woman saw the expressions of the two and thought it was normal. This was the expression of a thrill-seeking college student in America. Her camp had entertained such young people many times so far. Clap, clap. The old woman clapped her hands happily. Many women with bows and iron weapons instantly surrounded the two. Come join our hunting activities. You should fully enjoy the fun of nature in the city. Come on, let's run. The old woman motioned for the crowd to make way for them to enter the depths of the forest. She looked at the two prey maliciously, expecting them to show a panicked expression. However, the two acted as if they didn't hear or see anything. Thea glanced around and saw that the other party's arrows were all made of stone, and the archers were a group of thin and weak women. Even Tommy and Laurel could kill them all, let alone the two of them who weren't human. She was different from Diana. Although she had been blessed by the gods, she was born with it. She didn't need to study it. She only needed to know how to use it. Thea's divine power was all pieced together. She scraped a little from one person and absorbed a little from another. Her research on divine power could be said to be the best in the world. Although there were some fluctuations of divine power in the campsite, most of it was emitted from this area. None of the women present were qualified to be the host. Thea originally wanted to act like a little white flower to trick the old woman, but she didn't expect the other party to be so anxious. She didn't even say a few words and revealed her fangs. Thea could only give up her initial plan. Since you like to play rough, we'll play with you. The old woman put on the face of a cultist during the day, but found that the other party was not afraid at all. Strange. The young people in the past would have been scared and ran forward trembling. Why weren't the two women afraid? There was a murmur in the air. It was as soft as the wind, but when the words fell into the old woman's ears, it was like thunder. She immediately reacted and ordered, "Attack!" Although the women felt that this was different from their usual habits, they still mechanically drew their bows and shot dozens of arrows at the two women. This level of attack was like a joke in the eyes of the two women. Thea raised her left hand, and a small whirlwind appeared around the two women. All the arrows were sucked in. She clenched her left hand, and the whirlwind trembled violently. The arrows that were mixed in the wind were directly shattered. Blasphemers! Kill them! The old woman shouted loudly, and at the same time, she retreated quickly. Thea couldn't let her run away. "Dear, you can ask that guy." Diana had been holding back for a long time. She threw out the lasso of truth and tied the old woman up like a rice dumpling. She pulled the old woman back to the two women. "Kill them, kill them!" The old woman was still in mid-air, and was still shouting loudly. If it wasn't for her previous behavior of running away, one would think that she would rather die than submit. The leader was invaded at first sight, but he didn't stop the enthusiasm of the rest of the women. The originally numb and dull faces were replaced by fanaticism. Cold light flashed in their eyes as they rushed towards the two women. Many children even picked up stones on the ground and tried to attack the two women. "Back off!" Thea completely released her aura, and the power of fear instantly spread out in all directions with her as the center. The few women closest to her were paralyzed with fear, and the women in the distance were all stumbling. Obviously, their souls were damaged, but their bodies were still under the control of the evil god, and they were ready to continue attacking. Quite tenacious. Thea observed the results of her battle. The evil god here was the so-called god of the cheetah. How ironic. The prey pretended to be the hunter and enjoyed the worship. She didn't know if this guy was a Native American god, or an African totem animal spirit. Let me give you an even bigger surprise. Thea put on the yellow light ring and magnified her emotions 100 times. Using the method of the Martian hunter, she released a wider range of mental shock. An invisible shockwave swept through everyone's hearts like a hurricane. This time, no matter if it was far or near, old or young, except for Diana, who had a high fear resistance and was sparring with her, everyone was knocked out. These people were not injured physically, but because their minds were controlled by the evil god, it meant that the evil god took all the power of the shockwave. They just needed to rest after the battle. However, the evil god was in trouble. Its biggest weakness was that its consciousness was divided into hundreds of parts to control these believers. Its original consciousness might have been able to resist Thea's mental shock, but after being divided into hundreds of parts, its resistance was weakened 100 times. It would be strange if it could resist it. The cracking sound was faint at first, but it grew louder and louder. A big crack appeared on the statue of the goddess of the hunt, and a pure black cheetah rolled out from it. The cheetah's eyes were still shining with wisdom, but it quickly dimmed, as if it wanted to remember Thea and the girl's appearance. Then, it fell down and never got up again. Chapter 367. Is she dead? Diana asked. Thea looked at the corpse carefully for a long time. From the perspective of this corpse, she is indeed dead. The mental burden was too great in a short period of time, and her soul was crushed. But before she completely died, she used some kind of secret method to abandon this body. If I'm not wrong, your friend Minerva is the new host. Thea's judgment was not baseless. The evil aura lingering in the surrounding land, sky, and jungle was rapidly dissipating. As for the women who pretended to be Amazons, she was too lazy to care about them. After they recovered their minds, they would be seriously ill, but it was also a good thing for them to leave this evil place. Do you still want to ask this guy? Diana raised the old woman in her hand and asked. The old woman was the closest, and it just so happened that she had the most evil aura in her body, so she was the first to bear the brunt. Facing Thea's mental attack that was magnified 100 times, she could not resist and fainted. Thea scratched her head a little. She had indeed forgotten about this guy, but it was not appropriate to not use a ranged attack in the situation at that time. She could only say that this old woman was unlucky. Let her go, you ask, I'll deal with this corpse. Thea lowered her head and touched the Black Panther's body. There was not much divine power left in this body, and Thea guessed that it might have been transferred to the Panther Girl. However, this corpse was an out-and-out divine corpse. It was of a slightly higher level than the shark god Kamal that Sia's team of 5 had killed. If they brought it back to make a new set of armor, it would definitely be very effective. Because they did not directly fight, Thea was afraid that the other party was not completely dead. What if the other party faked her death? Or what if she came back to life after a while like those melodramatic TV dramas? She took out an alien cutter, installed a portable power source, and worked on the spot, cutting the panther's body into 8 pieces. The body was scattered like this. If she could still come back to life, Thea would write the word admire for her. Summoning water magic, he washed the dirty water on his hands, and Diana's questioning ended quickly. The old woman said that she was the one who ordered Minerva to steal the Godslayer's sword. Minerva was also under her orders to pierce her chest with the sword and turn into that half-human half-beast monster. However, she did not know Minerva's exact location. She only knew that Minerva headed south. Diana puts away the lasso. The old woman also sees Thea's brutal dismemberment of the leopard's body. She seems to think of something and has a mental breakdown. South again. Thea was a little depressed. They had found this camp in the north of Louisiana, and now they were almost in Canada, and now they had to go back south again. But Thea could see the reluctance in Diana's eyes, so she could only continue the pursuit with her. In the Brazilian rainforest. I hate this place. In order to prevent the Panther Girl's sudden attack, the two could only chase after her fully armed, all the way from the northwest of the United States to the southeast of Brazil. The weather in the rainforest made Thea very uncomfortable. It was hot and humid. The two did not dare to fly in the sky. The trees on the ground were too lush, and they were afraid of losing her. The only good news was that Gideon had finished collecting the data of the other party. Footprints, hair, speed per second, walking characteristics, all were recorded. After that, the artificial intelligence would calculate the other party's route based on the Quinn family's satellite and supercomputer, and from time to time correct the direction through footprints and other traces. If not for Gideon's calculations, it would be a dream to rely on Thea and Diana to track the Panther Girl who had not been to human society and only fled in the jungle. The climate here is too uncomfortable. Diana also felt uncomfortable all over. She was familiar with the climate of the African grasslands and the Mediterranean Sea, but she was not used to the humid climate of the tropical rainforest. Her body seemed to be sweating all the time, but her divine body was far beyond that of a human, so she could not sweat even if she wanted to. While the two were moving, they suddenly noticed something unusual and looked at each other. The traces disappeared? Diana took off her shield, held her sword with one hand, and looked around vigilantly. Thea no longer cared about the consumption of her magic power, and used the Eye of Horus to search for suspicious figures. To the west, Thea shouted, and at the same time, the freeze gun in her arm shot out several frosty air. A golden figure flashed past her eyes, and a 5-centimeter deep hole was cut in the metal armor on her chest that could withstand a nuclear bomb. Thea. Diana hurriedly protected her side and threw out a lasso. Unfortunately, the other party was too fast, and after missing the first attack, she escaped into the forest again, preparing for the next sneak attack. In fact, to deal with this kind of fast guy, flying to a high place and bombarding from above was the most convenient. However, Thea and the others still had to catch the other party, so they had to spend some effort. "You don't want to come out, do you?" The two of them were vigilant for a long time, but the other party was very calm and only silently waited for a good opportunity. Thea and Diana established a telepathic connection, so the two of them could discuss plans at any time during the battle without worrying about the other party's vigilance. Dark magic. Thea gathered all of her magic power and suddenly released it. Thea was the most familiar with this spell, and although its level was low, sometimes low-level spells could be effective. A thick fog shrouded the space within a few miles, and although Thea couldn't see anything, she was the one who released the magic power, so she could more or less sense it. She quickly found the leopard girl hiding in a pile of withered leaves. The other party was stunned by the sudden darkness, but her bloodthirsty personality made her not escape, and instead wanted to kill the two girls. Thea's magic power sensed that the other party was cautiously approaching her. "You bastard! Do you think I'm a pushover? If I don't make you lose a layer of skin this time, I'll take your surname. Close your eyes." Thea instructed Diana in the telepathic connection, and then she estimated that the leopard girl was still 3 meters away from her. The other party stared at her, bent her knees, and was about to attack, but Thea instantly cast another spell, Illumination. A bright light shone in the darkness, and the leopard girl was completely unprepared, especially when she was staring at Thea. Her eyes were wide open, afraid that the other party would nimbly dodge her attack. Plan 2, Plan 3, the leopard girl thought about several sets in her heart, preparing for possible situations. But the premise was that Thea would dodge her attack, otherwise, all of her ideas would be useless. The leopard girl calculated many possibilities, but unfortunately, she missed out on the variety of spells. A low-level spell like Illumination, not to mention Thea, even Damien could instantly cast it. The leopard girl didn't expect this possibility, and the strong light was instantly received by her retina. Her pupils shrank, and her eyeball muscles spasmed. The leopard girl reflexively covered her eyes with her hands. Diana cooperated with her very well, holding the shield and slamming it down. At the same time, Thea also kept casting mud spell, oil spell, and dense spider web spell in the trees, with only one purpose, and that was to reduce her speed. Chapter 368. The leopard girl's vision was temporarily blocked. Although the burning sensation on her eyeballs had been affecting her judgment, she still managed to dodge Diana's attack by relying on her beastly intuition. The blind leopard girl didn't know that Thea had thrown a lot of grease spells. When she dodged Diana's pounce, she naturally took a step back. The soles of her feet felt as if she had stepped on a lump of grease, slippery. Normally, with her balance, she could run 2 steps on the grease, but now the swelling pain in her eyeballs seriously destroyed her sense of balance. She stumbled to maintain her balance. Diana's sword slashed her shoulder, causing yellow blood to gush out. Thea saw that they had already started fighting, so she put away her dark magic. This was something that Diana had discussed with her in advance. The leopard girl didn't have a deep relationship with her in this space-time, but they were more or less friends. Diana felt that she had an obligation to help her. However, as the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. The upright Diana was also influenced by Sia to become a little two-faced. Her request was to create a fair battlefield, and Sia completed this task very faithfully. Within a radius of a few miles, Thea released nearly 50 spells related to speed reduction. Later, she was afraid that the leopard girl could still turn the tables, so she took advantage of the fall and added a gravity spell and a speed reduction spell on the leopard girl. She dug 2 deep pits on the leopard girl's path and pulled a few ropes between a few trees at ankle height. She used several tricks to deal with blind people. Even if the leopard girl escaped alive, she would still have a psychological shadow when she thought of today's scene. At this moment, the leopard lady could not see anything. It was as if there was an iron rod stirring in her head. There were sundries under her feet, and her body seemed to be carrying dozens of kilograms of lead. This was the fair duel that Sia had created for her lover. Putting away her dark magic, Thea finally saw the leopard girl's glory. Half-human, half-beast reputation was well-deserved. She had sharp ears and sharp teeth, and the nails on her hands and feet were replaced by sharp claws. Her body seemed to be covered with a layer of yellowish animal skin, full of spots, and a long tail behind her. According to her image, she could be given a savage index of 70 points. The only pity was that her yellow vertical pupils, which were supposed to emit a fierce glint, were currently smearing her overall image. Facing the pouncing Diana, the leopard girl no longer had the time to rub her eyes. Her sore eyeball muscles caused tears to flow down uncontrollably. Diana's current attack rhythm was very strong. She didn't blindly attack, giving her opponent the illusion that the difference in strength wasn't big. The leopard girl, who didn't have much combat experience, was fooled. She knew that there were two enemies nearby. She didn't know what Thea was doing, so she could only desperately attack Diana, trying to create a one-on-one situation. Diana's defense was the best in the multiverse. At least, Thea had never seen anyone play a shield better than her. Facing the leopard girl whose speed had been reduced by half, she fought very calmly. Block, parry, dodge, she perfectly fused her movement and martial arts. If it wasn't for the wrong timing, Thea would have applauded. The leopard girl couldn't attack for a long time, and was dragged down by the messy environment around her. Whether it was physical strength or mental strength, they were all consumed quickly. She realized that she couldn't continue fighting like this. After forcing Diana to retreat with a feint, she didn't care about the direction. She turned 180 degrees and prepared to escape. However, she had only taken 2 steps before she was stuck by something sticky. If she sprinted with all her strength, she would definitely be able to break through the cobweb, but she had only run 2 steps. How could she have the speed? She was an agility type, not a strength type. Her arms swung widely, and with her sharp claws, she forcefully split open the cobweb that stuck to her. But this delay of a second allowed Diana to catch up. "Diana, let me go. Aren't we friends?" The leopard girl didn't know how many cobwebs there were around her. The big pit on the ground and the tripping ropes made her sick. She didn't want to stay in this broken place for a second longer. Her cunning nature made it impossible for her to rush out by force, so she immediately changed to a soft one. "Minerva, I'm helping you. Come back with me and accept the trial. You can't continue to be wrong," Diana said very sincerely. "As expected, it's Diana. I think it smells a little like you. I didn't expect to guess right." The leopard girl's nose twitched twice. "Is this the true strength you've been hiding? My God said that you're a long-lived species, an existence that's higher than us ordinary people? Isn't that right?" Diana fell silent. No matter how she answered this question, it wasn't appropriate. She chose to keep her mouth shut. "The one who created this battlefield is your companion, right? He's also a supernatural person, right? I'm so envious." The leopard girl's tone was stern. It didn't sound like envy at all. Instead, it sounded like jealousy, a jealousy that went deep into her bones. "Come back with me and redeem your sins. You still have hope." Diana tried to bring the topic back. "Hee hee." The leopard girl's smile was incomparably terrifying. She was 30% human and 70% beast. Her humanity was rapidly disappearing. "Redeem? Me? What sins did I commit? I've already become like this. I can't go back. Put away your love, Diana. You can't save me." The leopard girl berated sternly. Her expression was deranged as she used both her hands and feet to fiercely attack Diana. She had already recovered some of her vision and stamina during the conversation. She felt that Diana's strength was about the same as when she was weak just now. She wanted to suddenly exert her strength and finish off Diana. However, she had underestimated Diana and overestimated herself. A round of storm-like attacks were all blocked, and the little stamina she had recovered was wasted again. "How can you be so strong? I sacrificed so much, but I'm still not as good as you." At this moment, the leopard girl was wrapped in anger. Jealousy, indignation, injustice, and all kinds of negative emotions gathered together. Her attacks became sharper and sharper. She had already forgotten to run away. She only wanted to follow her bloodthirsty desire and kill Diana. The negotiation was fruitless. Diana felt that she had already lived up to that little bit of friendship. Finally, she no longer held back and used the power of the Guardian Silver Bracelet. In the first few moves, the leopard girl was barely able to resist. After 10 moves, Diana's strength and speed rapidly increased as if there was no end to it. Although it did not reach the leopard girl's maximum speed, it was more than enough to deal with her. The fire god's sword felt its master's fighting spirit. The sword's body ignited with raging flames as it slashed and stabbed. Every move was aimed at the leopard girl's vital points. Although the leopard girl had the body of a cheetah, it was not her own memories. In all aspects, she was completely suppressed by Diana. Admit defeat. Diana's speed increased by another level. Borrowing the gap between her body, she slashed at the leopard girl's ribs with her sword and then fiercely slapped the back of her head with her shield. In the leopard girl's dizzy state, the truth lasso was thrown out and tied her up tightly. Chapter 369. In order to prevent the panther lady from escaping, Thea froze her limbs again, leaving only her fierce head outside. Unless her neck could be retracted, she wouldn't be able to bite the two women 10 meters away. Amanda was very happy to receive Thea's call. She happily said that she would take over personally and said that Thea would be able to see her adult love soon. For Amanda, it should be a good deal to throw out Oliver, a guy with an excessive sense of justice, in exchange for the Panther Lady. Thea thought so. The agents of the Heavenly Eye Society couldn't jump out immediately, so the two could only wait. The Panther Lady was still scolding. Thea originally wanted to ask where the god-slaying dagger was, but the other party didn't communicate with her at all. They just insulted her with filthy words. Thea didn't want to touch such an evil weapon, so she left it to Amanda to deal with. After throwing out 15 mental attacks in a row and knocking the Panther Lady unconscious, the surroundings finally quieted down. In such a humid environment, it was inconvenient for the two to do something they liked, so they could only chat casually. Just as Sia was telling the story of her childhood surfing with Oliver, she saw a woman dressed in Arabian clothes in front, and a man wearing a black diving suit and a huge, strangely shaped oxygen mask behind her. The two of them kept fighting, killing their way from the forest to the open space in front of Sia and the others. Previously, Panther Lady had chosen this place as the battlefield after considering the surrounding environment. This was the only open space in the vicinity. The two strangers naturally made the same choice, but they didn't expect there to be outsiders here. The man wearing the oxygen mask had his entire head wrapped tightly. The mask was oval in shape, and two big red crystals covered where the eyes should be. From afar, he looked like a red-eyed fly. The man's expression couldn't be seen, but Thea, Diana, and the Arabian woman looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. The Arabian woman glanced at the frozen Panther Lady. She didn't know the origin of the two women in front of her, but she still shouted kindly, "Run!" The man in the diving suit behind her seemed to treat Thea and Diana as innocent passers-by. Although it was strange to meet living people in the rainforest, he didn't take it to heart at all. He continued to chase the woman without a word. He just raised his arm at Thea and Diana. There seemed to be some kind of launching device on his wrist. Two extremely thin and long metal spikes shot out between the two's eyebrows. In his heart, Thea and Diana were two dead people, not worth his time. But 2 seconds later, he was dumbfounded. For a long time after that, every time he thought of this meeting, he wanted to bang his head against the wall. What was wrong with my hand at that time? Can't I just pretend not to see it? However, he didn't have the ability to foresee the future. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to foresee that far. The appearance of the two women was too confusing. If Death Knell, who was as big as a mountain, was sitting here, the man in the diving suit might not be so nosy. However, Thea and Diana had changed into casual clothes after the battle. In addition, it was hot and humid here, and they were wearing cooler clothes. They also didn't have any weapons in their hands. No matter how he looked at them, they looked like two harmless vases. Ah! The man in the diving suit ran more than 10 meters away. The screams and the smell of blood that he expected did not appear. He was slower than the Arabian woman, and only then did he see the half-frozen Panther Lady. Although the Panther Lady was unconscious, the beastly aura that she exuded was still very eye-catching. "Hey, are you a black manta? I'll return this to you." Thea and Diana played with the steel needle that he shot out for a while. They didn't know what material it was made of. They only saw that it was very sharp. Thea played with it for a while and felt that it was boring. She threw it back. Although she didn't specially practice darts like the Bat family, Thea's long-range attack attribute was almost maxed out. She could play any long-range attack very well, and this steel needle was no exception. The man in the diving suit whose identity was exposed was Sea King Arthur Curry's old enemy, Black Manta. He was a very famous treasure hunter in the underground world. Because Sea King killed his father by mistake, He only had one goal left in life, and that was revenge. Using his years of savings and his excellent mechanical engineering knowledge, Black Manta, an ordinary person without any abilities, created a diving suit and various lethal weapons. He embarked on a lonely path of revenge. In the underground world, he had an outstanding reputation. Usually, he wore a different kind of oxygen mask, and no one had seen his real face. Whether it was on land or in the sea, he usually wore a diving suit with an oxygen mask, so there were many people who knew him. However, at this moment, his identity was exposed by a young and beautiful woman like Thea. He instantly became nervous. Facing the steel needle that was thrown in the opposite direction, he chose to dodge it cautiously. Your strength and speed are beyond that of ordinary people? Is it because of your combat suit? Thea gathered magic on her face, as if she was wearing a hazy mask. After the vibration, her voice was completely different from usual. Esper. Another Esper. Are you also Arthur's companion? Black Manta's voice had obviously been changed. His voice was a little ethereal, but his tone showed that he was not happy. Get out of here. Thea didn't want to care about their trivial matters. She just wanted to quickly hand over the leopard girl and then go back to take a good bath. However, she didn't know if her tone was a little unfriendly, or if she had been in a high position all year round, but she naturally had a condescending tone. This made the sensitive Black Manta a little uncomfortable. He misunderstood her meaning. There was a wave of energy on his mask, and 2 orange lasers shot out from his eyes. F***CK. This idiot doesn't know how to listen. What I meant was for you guys to go somewhere else to fight. How did you interpret it that way? Thea was speechless. Diana took out her shield and easily blocked the lasers. It could even block Doomsday's heat rays. This kind of laser made by human black technology was nothing. This is bad. Seeing that his strongest attack didn't work, Black Manta's heart pounded. He finally realized that these 2 women who were dressed as passers-by were not ordinary people. He wanted to continue chasing the Arabian woman, but how could the warm-hearted Diana let him go? Originally, the 2 of them were one in front and one behind, so it was difficult to determine who was good and who was evil. Now that Black Manta was so fierce, she didn't hesitate and slashed down with her sword. Black Manta could only take out 2 long swords and block Diana's Vulcan sword. Clang! A crisp sound entered Thea's ears. She immediately noticed the abnormality. The material of these 2 long swords was extraordinary. The other party's 2 swords didn't seem to be made of Earth's existing metal. In the future, Black Manta could use these 2 swords to fight against the Sea King's divine trident. Now he could block the Vulcan sword. Considering his profession, it wasn't difficult to analyze that it was most likely a metal found in some underwater ruins. He was intelligent and talented. He would be an outstanding subordinate. However, Thea thought about it and decided to give up. Black Manta was focused on revenge. He didn't care about any price or morals. This was the only meaning of his life. No matter how heaven-defying the hinting technique was, it couldn't change this. Thea could only give up on the idea of recruiting him. Chapter 370. What a waste of such a talent. Thea looked at the Arabian woman who had run 200 meters and realized that her pursuers were not following her. She circled around and came back again. This woman did not know the strength of Thea and Selena, so she took out a scimitar and was ready to help. Thea quickly pulled her back. What a joke. How could an Earthling win against Diana? Black Manta was quite strong and could even be said to be the underwater version of Batman. However, the main premise was that he was prepared, understood the opponent's information, and specially made a bunch of high-tech equipment. This was the secret to his victory. Now, he had no information at all. He wanted to wear a diving suit and defeat Diana, who was wearing a godlike outfit, on land? That was simply a dream. Moreover, Thea did not recognize this Arabian woman at first, but now she finally remembered some things. This woman was one of the first few teammates of the Sea King, Arthur Curry. The 6 of them formed a team called Alien Tribe. Unfortunately, their team was too weak. 6 espers with 6 divine weapons were defeated by an ordinary person like Black Manta. Thea felt that if she called her subordinates 6 against 6, it would be easy to wipe them out. Don't worry, my partner is very strong. Thea pulled back the Arabian woman who was about to attack with her scimitar. Black Manta is a famous hunter, he. Before the Arabian woman could finish her sentence, Diana had an overwhelming advantage. She opened her mouth to say something but could not continue. Diana was far superior to Black Manta in terms of strength, speed, and skills. Her opponent was not a martial arts expert, but an engineer and treasure hunter who was bent on revenge. He was no match for Diana. Lasers, fishing nets, water spikes, all kinds of methods were used. His attacks were effective against the Sea King team, but they were useless against Diana. The only thing worth praising was his diving suit. It was unknown what material it was made of, but Diana saw a flaw in it. She slashed the fire god's sword diagonally, and a huge force acted on the soft diving suit. There was an obvious dent, but the diving suit's toughness and density were extremely good. After a slight dent, it immediately returned to its original state. It actually did not break. Anti-piercing and anti-slashing? Diana put away her shield and feinted with her left foot. When Black Manta dodged to the side, she clenched her right fist and punched him in the stomach. The other party was just an ordinary human. She did not use the power of the silver bracelet. Otherwise, the power of 1,000 tons would have split him in half. The punch landed squarely on the Black Manta Ray's lower abdomen. The special diving suit's texture was indeed excellent, but it was useless in the face of pure strength. Diana's normal attack was not something an ordinary person could withstand. The other party's oxygen mask was airtight. Whether it was diving or fighting underwater, it was a very useful equipment. However, this time he suffered. A large mouthful of blood rushed to his mouth, but the airtight mask caused the blood to flow back into his trachea, almost causing him to suffocate. He wanted to cough, but he couldn't. He wanted to swallow, but he couldn't. Not daring to continue fighting, he turned around and ran. Come back here. Tell me, what's your motive? Diana pulled the Black Manta Ray back. Following her question, the mantra lasso flashed with light. Collect 3 artifacts of the God of Death, find the 7th artifact, rule the land, and kill the Sea King. Black Manta was really shocked. Although he tried his best to resist, the power of the artifact was no joke. Even the gods had to tell the truth in front of the lasso of mantra. He was just a mortal, so he could not control his mouth at all. He told Black Manta everything that he wanted to know. These words did not mean anything to Diana. The Arabian woman did not understand the power of the mantra lasso, so she was skeptical. However, when these words fell into Thea's ears, she could not help but ponder. Thea only knew the story of the Sea King, Arthur Curry. The god of death mentioned by Black Manta was the first king of Atlantis. She vaguely remembered that the 7th artifact was a magic staff. There was no doubt about its power, but if he wanted to rule the land with a magic staff, it was time to wake up. Magic staff? Magic staff. A thought suddenly appeared in Thea's mind. Although it was not impossible to cast spells with a sword, it looked more like a Mao Shan Taoist than a mage. If she got the magic staff, would it be more beautiful the next time she casts spells? This thing is destined to be with me. Sia nodded silently. Initially, she did not care much about this matter, but now, her attitude had changed. She only remembered that the god of death's relics were left on a small island in the Atlantic Ocean. The Sea King 6 knew the exact location, but she did not. Your enemy seems to be planning a big conspiracy and needs us. Thea put on the face of a righteous friend and said to the Arabian woman. However, before she could finish, she was interrupted by a flash of golden light. Teleportation? Thea felt that this unknown rainforest was getting more lively. The golden light flashed and a man and 2 women walked out. The man in the lead was bare-chested and wore green pants. He held a golden trident in his hand. Behind him was a red-haired woman in a green tights and a crown. The last to walk out was a woman with brown skin and an anxious expression. Beside her were 2 jaguars. Why is the Sea King here? Although they had never met before, Thea recognized his obvious features. The one with the crown behind him was his wife, Mira. As for the last woman, she was ignored by Thea. If she was not mistaken, she was a member of the Sea King's group of 6. While she was looking at the others, the Sea King and the others were also looking at her. For a moment, everyone was stunned. There were too many people here. Thea had 2 people on her side. The Sea King had 3 people, and the 2 prisoners were the Leopard Lady and Black Manta. The Arabian woman saw her companions and was about to greet them when the Sea King roared and raised his trident. He spat out a lightning bolt as thick as a child's arm at Black Manta. Although she didn't think that Black Manta was a good person, she didn't want others to hurt her own prisoner. Diana raised her eyebrows, clenched her shield in her right hand, and slammed it towards Lightning's direction. The first clash between the two divine weapons ended in a draw. Lightning was sent flying and a huge energy beam fell into the rainforest. It destroyed countless trees along the way and disappeared from their sight. Bastard! How dare you stop me? The Sea King's temper was as violent as ever. Diana wanted to argue with him, but seeing how rude he was, she did not waste any more time. She tied Black Manta up tightly with the lasso of truth and raised the guardian silver bracelet on her wrist. A violent energy gushed towards the Sea King from a few meters away. The Sea King did not expect this woman to be able to block his lightning. When he felt the invisible energy from the guardian's silver bracelet, he did not dare to be careless. He swung his trident like a windmill. Bam! Bam! The trident was wrapped in a layer of golden light. As the Sea King spun, the golden light resisted with all its might. The Sea King was pushed back 30 meters by the guardian silver bracelet's energy before he stopped. Woman, you! The Sea King calmed down and tried to explain. However, Diana's current goal in life was to eliminate the discrimination between men and women. The Sea King's words did not make her feel comfortable. Instead, it made her even angrier. She did not waste any more time and slashed her sword at him. Chapter 371. Is your innate incompatibility to this extent? Thea was speechless. She only remembered that these two were fighting in the Flashpoint paradox. But this wasn't the Flashpoint. These two were fighting inexplicably. Thea wanted to stop them, but she didn't know where to start. She turned her head and was about to let the Arabian woman speak to persuade them to quickly bring her to get the staff. When she turned her head, she saw the brown woman's two leopards wagging their tails and begging the leopard girl. The leopard girl had woken up at some point, her yellow eyes emitting a terrifying light. The brown woman kept talking to Mira. The Sea King's wife looked a little unhappy, but she still raised her hands and a large amount of water appeared. She wanted to break the ice that trapped the leopard girl. Stop! Thea knew that this was very melodramatic, but she still had to exchange for Amanda's adult favor. She had to stop them from releasing the leopard girl. She didn't have time to wear her armor and instantly shot 3 flame arrows at Mira. Surface person! How dare you attack me? She didn't know if Mira's good relatives came today, but it was as if she was possessed by a brainless unhappiness. Her hands were surrounded by water, and the water was gently stroked by her and turned into dozens of cold arrows, meeting Thea's magic arrows. The 2 arrows met in the air. Thea's magic was more pure, and Mira's was more numerous. The 2 were evenly matched. Yawala, what are you doing? They're not bad people. The Arabian woman hurriedly pulled the brown woman who was about to attack Thea. Cassina, are you okay? But my animal companion said they're bad people? The brown woman, Yawala, also noticed the problem and hurriedly called for her pet. But the pet that could die for her in the past didn't respond to her call. The 2 leopards were trying their best to help the leopard girl escape. Looking at the leopard girl's beast-like vertical pupils, even a simple person would know that there was a problem. The helpless thing was that no matter how the brown woman called, the 2 leopards ignored her. If their claws were broken, they would bite them with their teeth. If their teeth were broken, they would hit them with their heads. The ice on the leopard girl's body gradually cracked. You two, stop the leopard. The woman in the ice has blood on her hands. Don't let her come out. If you have more time, try to persuade this woman opposite me. Thea's strength was higher than Mela's, so she still had the time to observe the battlefield. The Sea King's 2 companions had no choice but to pull the 2 jaguars. The Arabian woman had been chased by the black manta ray for dozens of miles and was already exhausted. The brown woman, on the other hand, did not dare to be too harsh on her pet. One of them pulled the leopard's tail while the other pulled its leg. The leopard ignored them and only cared about saving the leopard girl. Idiot! Thea almost spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other side, Mela's eyes were bloodshot. She didn't even listen to Thea's explanation. The icicles, ice arrows, and water arrows didn't stop at all. On the other side, Diana could slightly suppress the Sea King, but she was very determined to protect the black manta ray. She could not break the stalemate in a short time. Help me stall those 2 jaguars. Thea released the moose that was stupidly sleeping in the ring and ordered in a low voice. The moose immediately felt the god of the cheetah in the leopard girl's body, especially when the other party stole the divine power of the moon goddess. This made the moose even more dissatisfied, but it still faithfully carried out Thea's order. As long as the two jaguars came close, it would use its antlers to push them back. Does this friend of yours understand English? Who can persuade her? Thea dealt with Melah's fierce attacks and was speechless. This couple was really a pair. They were really messing around. The Sea King's two companions hurriedly shouted, trying to stop Melah. However, the Queen of Atlantis acted as if she didn't hear them and continued to attack Thea fiercely. Needless to say, this must be the doing of the god of the cheetah in the leopard girl's body. The other party's methods were not brilliant, but it was triggered by Melah's bad temper. It was not without reason that Melah would be chosen by the angry Red Ring in the future. However, temper and strength were not the same. Even if she performed above her level, she was still inevitably suppressed by Thea. Her ability to control water came from her bloodline. It was definitely very powerful underwater, but on land, it was only a few things. Thea's single water attribute was not as good as her, but Thea's methods were extremely rich. Fireballs offset her ice arrows, wind blades, light spears, shadow arrows, and a large number of control and weakening spells, and threw them out. I'll pull her away. You guys go and persuade the guy with the fork. Thea was afraid that the battle between the two would break the ice on the leopard girl's body, so she took out the light ring and put it on. Dense chains appeared and bound Melah and flew into the distance. After running out of a certain range, the mind control effect would disappear, and the other party would wake up. Thea calculated well, but she flew a little too fast, and the two women on the ground were one step slower. She did not take the Sea King into account. You dare to hurt my wife. The Sea King saw Thea running away with Melah tied up, and immediately became anxious. Risking being hit by Diana's sword, the trident in his hand gathered a large amount of lightning, and a wash-basin-sized lightning ball was thrown at Thea. Do you think you're the only one who can use lightning? This stupid couple really made Thea a little angry. She took out the magical longbow, knocked Zeus's lightning arrow, and shot an arrow at the lightning ball below. The lightning ball from the Sea King's trident was white, like a storm brewing in the sea. Thea's lightning arrow was dark blue, as peaceful as the sky, but in this tranquility, there was a fatal danger. Two divine weapons that could emit the power of lightning welcomed the first collision since the day they were created. One was like a roar from the sea, the other was like a divine punishment from the sky. The divine weapon of Atlantis represented the last glory of the lost civilization, firm, tenacious, and unquestionable. Thea's Zeus arrow was also mixed with the god's supreme, great, and invincible spirit. The two different colored lightning finally met, and time seemed to freeze. The first second was calm, as if the previous fierce scene did not exist, but in the next second, the two balls of energy finally exploded violently. Boom! The two balls of energy disappeared, and the sound of the explosion seemed to pierce through the air. The huge energy spread in all directions, and the two women who were about to explain could only lie down on the ground to avoid the shock wave that swept across the rainforest in a radius of 10 miles. This round of collisions seemed to be evenly matched, but the Sea King was injured by Diana, and the trident's charging time was too short, so it did not fully exert the power of the divine weapon. Thea was even more hurried to fight. Her lightning magic needed to be mixed with fire, wind, and water elements. The power she shot out was only the power of the arrow, and it was far from her maximum damage limit. Both of them were very unhappy, and at the same time, they gathered energy and prepared for the next round of attack. Although Melah was confused, she still recognized the Sea King. She broke free from the chains and wanted to fight Thea together. Diana naturally could not just stand by and watch, so she stopped Melah. The four of them exchanged opponents, and prepared to fight the second round in confusion. Chapter 372. Diana often sparred with Thea, so she had ample experience in dealing with elemental energy. Mira's ability to control water was only slightly troublesome to her, but not fatal. She blocked the ice arrows and water arrows with her shield and slashed continuously with a Vulcan sword in her hand. Mira could only mobilize a large amount of water elements to form a shield to block the attacks. On the other hand, Thea's battle with the Sea King was not as gentle as theirs. The thunder element had always been unruly and was known to shake the 9 heavens. Energy exploded, and the sound and light effects were dazzling. The battle between the two had reached its climax right from the start. The Sea King was beaten silly by the two women, and had long forgotten what he wanted to do. Thea, on the other hand, wanted to see how powerful the Sea King's trident was. The lightning arrows in her hand did not stop, and she shot them one after another. Sometimes, She even condensed her own magic into the lightning arrows to launch a surprise attack on the Sea King. "Come down if you dare." The Sea King was in a passive position. He was almost invincible in the water, but his strength on land was reduced by a lot. Most importantly, he could not fly. After being hit by Thea for a long time, the Sea King, who was already angry, could no longer suppress his violent temper. Thea, who was hovering in mid-air, did not just shoot arrows. She also threw a few weakening spells from time to time. However, it was unknown whether it was because of the trident in his hand or because of his Atlantean bloodline, but the Sea King's magic resistance was surprisingly high. Among the people that Thea had met, only Diana had a higher magic resistance than him. She could resist 9 out of 10 spells, and the remaining spell could only last for a short time. Fear. Simple spells could not take him down, so Thea could only mix emotional energy into her spells. With the help of spells, the power of the lamp was continuously channeled into the Sea King's heart. This time, he could not resist. The death of his father, the supercilious looks of the people around him, the betrayal of his companions, and all kinds of tragic scenes surrounded his mind. Arthur. Seeing that her husband was in danger, Mela finally broke free from the control of the cheetah god. Her eyes regained their clarity. She raised her arm and took Diana's sword head-on with her wrist guard. Then, she flew up and created a large amount of ice to protect her husband. She completely ignored her own safety and looked at Thea and Diana vigilantly. Humph. Since it was a misunderstanding, Thea naturally did not continue to attack. She turned to look at the captive. What she saw infuriated her. Previously, the Black Manta had been tied up by Diana's lasso, but as the battle escalated, Diana had left him in the custody of the Sea King's 2 companions. The Black Manta had taken advantage of their unpreparedness and launched a sudden attack, injuring the Arabian woman. He then snatched the bag from her back and ran into the depths of the forest. The brown woman had to take care of her injured companion and hold back her 2 jaguar pets. Her brain, which was not smart to begin with, was completely muddled. Thea originally wanted to chase after the Black Manta, but the Panther Lady had already escaped. Although there was still a lot of ice on her body, she could barely run. How dare you run? Thea took out a lightning arrow and shot it. At the same time, she called for Diana to chase after her. The Sea King and Mela, who realized that they had made a mistake, saw that their companion was not in mortal danger and also helped to block them. Although the Panther Lady was powerful, her previous injuries were not light. She could not beat any of the 4 people now. In less than 3 kilometers, she was surrounded, beaten up, and captured again. This time, they did not dare to let their guard down. Perhaps the Panther Lady was not a threat, but the cheetah god in her body was indeed troublesome. Especially the other party's method of silently bewitching people's minds, it made them a little annoyed. Fortunately, there was still science to solve things that magic could not solve. Thea asked the elk to go back to sleep. Then, she picked out a few pieces of metal from the space ring. These pieces of metal were specially made by Batman to prevent the mind control of the Martian hunter. The composition was unknown, and the origin was unknown. It was a proper black technology product. Damien took it from his father in order to study the relationship between science and magic. Thea modified it into a headband on the spot and put it on the Panther Lady's head. From afar, it looked like the hoop spell, but the other party's mental fluctuations could not be omitted. After tying up the Panther Lady tightly, Thea got up and greeted them. The brown woman, Walla, apologized to Thea first. Her jaguar was the first to be bewitched. The 2 leopards were very pitiful now that they were out of control. They also lowered their heads cooperatively and whimpered, begging for forgiveness. Thea now had a special love for animals. She had come into contact with a lot of elk, gorilla, shark, and unicorn. She touched the big heads of the 2 leopards and felt that they were very nice. She wondered if she should ask Walla later if there were any little leopards so that she could take one back and play with it. The 2 leopards' claws were broken, their teeth were missing, and their bodies were dirty. Thea threw out 2 cleansing spells, and their bodies were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Arabian woman, Cassina, next to her, covered her shoulder that had been pierced by the black manta ray. She looked very pitiful. Thea thought about it and also threw a healing spell at her. The 2 sides exchanged their names. Thea said her real name. She thought that she would receive some exclamations like, "So it's you," and other exclamations, but these people's reactions surprised her. They were either hermits, savages, or simply Atlanteans. They had never heard of Thea's name. The slightly depressed Thea ran to the side to tease the two leopards. The two leopards were healed by her and their intimacy with her greatly improved. If it were not for their deeper ties with Walla, they would most likely have gone back to Star City with her. The rest of the people were not in the mood. The Arabian woman told them that she had been chased by the black manta ray all the way. She was quite happy that her nemesis was captured by two passers-by. She did not expect that after a melodramatic battle, the duck in her hand flew away. Not only did the duck fly away, but it also injured her and stole one of the god of death's divine weapons, the golden seal. This lady's divine weapon. The Arabian woman pointed at Diana. The black manta ray told the truth. He wanted to get 3 divine weapons, activate the mark of the tomb, and find the 7th divine weapon of the god of death. The Arabian woman, Cassina, told them everything she knew. I want to gather my companions and deal with the black manta ray together, the Sea King declared enthusiastically. Mira looked at him lovingly. Thea pursed her lips. You have a few mutants with a bunch of divine weapons. You want to besiege an ordinary person, but you're shouting so righteously. Do you have any shame? Do you need our help? Thea did not say anything. Diana, who had a strong sense of justice, spoke up. We don't need your help, Greek. Mira looked at Diana cautiously. Her husband had too many women around him. Cassina and Walla claimed that they were her husband's companions, but she had never heard him mention them. Mira, who was blindly in love, was like a female beast, watching every woman who approached her husband. Chapter 373. Thea was unhappy when she heard the hostility in her tone. Greek. The Greeks used to fight alongside the Atlanteans. You're not looking down on your former allies, are you? Besides, I don't think you're an Atlantean. You're from Zebel, right? You're an exile from Atlantis. Huh. The Sea King was confused. He turned to look at his wife. Mela avoided the Sea King's gaze with a hint of panic in her eyes. Thea continued. King of Death? Is that what you call him? Don't you know that his real name is Atlan? He's the creator of Atlantis, the first king. To think that you descendants would call him the King of Death. That's ridiculous. Diana also assisted. I know Atlan. Mother mentioned him in her books. He was a great king. His achievements were comparable to the sages in the history of human heroes. The Sea King Arthur Curry was speechless. Half a year ago, he was still guarding the lighthouse in Maine. How would he know about these secrets from tens of thousands of years ago? When others called him the King of Death, he just followed suit. Now, he realized that something was wrong. It sounded like an ancestor. Atlan is the King of Death that you speak of. He built Atlantis on land. It was a civilization before Earth civilization. The King of Atlan was broad-minded. He abandoned his prejudices and accepted all races. As long as they agreed with his ideals, he would see them as part of Atlantis. Thea began to teach them. Of course, these things were brought from her memory. Diana knew that she had read countless books and was not surprised. The Sea King and his wife listened with great interest. It had always been the Sea King's goal to promote harmony between the people on the surface and underwater. Now that he heard that his ancient ancestors had done the same, a strong sense of recognition surged in his heart. Unexpectedly, Thea took a 180-degree turn. What she said next gave him a heavy blow. The King of Death's inclusive policy caused strong dissatisfaction among the conservatives. His younger brother launched a coup and took away the Sea King's trident that symbolized authority. The founder of the kingdom was expelled from his home by his family. You mean? The Sea King raised the trident in his hand, his face full of disbelief. My ancestors were traitors? Thea shook her head slightly. Traitor or not, the truth has long been lost to history. But I only know that the 7th divine artifact that you were discussing just now is not correct. He pointed at the trident in the Sea King's hand. This trident was forged by the god of death in his early days. After he was exiled from his country, he forged 6 new divine weapons. You have 5 of them, and the remaining 1. What about the last one? The few of them hurriedly asked. Even the 2 jaguars lying on the ground, unable to understand human language, pricked up their ears to listen. Thea was a little hesitant. According to the records, the the god of death created a staff in the end. The power of this staff was almost infinite in his hands. He sank the entire continent of Atlantis with one blow. I think it's a bit of a boast. Divine weapons are not that powerful, Diana explained calmly. Thea did not say anything. Either the full power of the staff could only be unleashed in the hands of the god of death, or he found some magic node, like the Purgatory Island where Oliver stayed for years. Otherwise, sinking the continent with one blow was too powerful. We can help you fight against the Black Manta Rays, but the god of death staff is too dangerous. We can't leave it in the hands of the Atlanteans. Thea finally revealed her purpose, and then threw a big bomb at them. The god of death disappeared after sinking Atlantis. Many people thought that he had crossed the boundary between life and death and was still sleeping somewhere. The human scholars, the Greek gods, and your records all called him the god of death for this reason. The few of them were not fools. They roughly understood Thea's meaning. If they kept it in their hands, they would only be able to fight the god of death. If they gave it to Thea, they would have someone to share the hatred. Maybe the god of death would come back to life and attack the continent directly. Mela thought this was a good idea. She winked at the Sea King and asked him to agree. The people on the continent? The Sea King was still a little hesitant. Should the god of death bomb explode on the continent or on the Atlanteans? He can't unleash his full power without the divine weapon. There are so many people on the continent. As long as he appears, he will be discovered. Thea felt that the old zombie would not be able to withstand 2 punches from Superman. Taking his equipment would not be a problem at all. Well, as the king of Atlantis, I agree to your request. The god of death staff will be kept on the surface. The Sea King did not care about the divine weapon. The 5 divine weapons that he found that day were distributed to his friends. He did not want the flashy armor that was originally given to him when he inherited the throne. He only wore a belt that symbolized his royal power and took a trident. The 2 sides happily finalized the details. Vara, who had the teleportation pearl, went to pick up their remaining friends. The few of them gathered quickly. They were the war prisoner, who wore the god of death's golden shackles and could cast a protective field. The detective, who held a golden key that could open any lock. The last to arrive was Vostok. He wore a golden helmet on his head that had no water, no air, and did not need to eat or drink. Vostok was an astronaut who grew up in a claustrophobic environment. Mela saw that her husband's other 3 companions were all men and heaved a sigh of relief. Before they could officially discuss it, Amanda arrived. So many people? Detective? Why are you here? When did you send me the document I asked you to look for last time? When Amanda got off the plane, she immediately saw the detective, who was wearing high-tech equipment and didn't expose a single bit of his skin. She then looked at the war prisoner. Soldier, which unit are you from? I think I've seen your number before. Thea quickly pulled her aside. Amanda was almost obsessed with rebuilding her suicide squad. She did not need the Panther Girl for obvious reasons. However, Thea had to warn her that the Panther Girl's strength was not something that could be easily manipulated by the likes of the Clown Girl. On the other side, the Sea King also called the detective to the side and asked what Amanda did. The great detective maintained close contact with many organizations all over the world. As for the famous Amanda, he naturally had many dealings with her. He was a little puzzled as to how the Sea King had gotten involved with Amanda, but he didn't hide anything from his good friend and told him everything he knew. A member of the government, the Heaven's Eye Society? Although the Sea King had lived on the ground for many years, he had always been uninformed. He did not know anything about the higher-ups. How do you know that young woman? The detective used his chin to point at Thea, who was talking to Amanda. The Sea King could only tell him about the muddled fight between the 2 groups of people. Chapter 374. After the Sea King finished speaking, he noticed that the detective was deep in thought. Why is she famous among the humans? I don't have any impression of her. The detective glanced at him. He was speechless at his friend's dullness. Thea had already taken off her mask. How could the detective, who had been active in intelligence gathering, not recognize her? She's a super rich person. I've collected a lot of information about her. If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have thought that she's a superpower user. How's her combat power? The Sea King was embarrassed when he heard this question. He was facing the fear shock head-on. If Mela hadn't used a large ice wall to keep him awake, he would have been talking nonsense. Now, in front of his old friend, he couldn't say that he was almost beaten to the ground and called for his father. He could only say vaguely, "About the same as me." The detective couldn't help but size him up. The Sea King was flustered by his stare, so he changed the topic. "Arthur, if you want the people on the surface and underwater to live in harmony, she can provide you with some help. In recent years, she's been making a lot of big moves. The government and the military are behind all of them." The Sea King nodded. It was still too early to say anything. Both the people on the surface and underwater were not ready to accept each other. He still needed to observe before he could make a decision. Not far away, Thea and Amanda had also completed the handover. A few fully armed soldiers carried the Panther Girl, who was tied up like a dumpling, onto the plane. Whatever happened after that would have nothing to do with Thea. If they wanted to ask her for help again, they would have to pay a new price. After Amanda left, the Sea King gave everyone a brief introduction. Next, they would study how to deal with the black manta rays. "It's too wet here. Can we talk on my plane? I don't feel safe walking on the ground." The detective interrupted the Sea King. Everyone looked around. The originally deserted tropical rainforest was now a mess after Thea and the Sea King's lightning clash. Ditches were everywhere, and many trees were smoking. A large number of birds and insects were leaving the area in groups. No matter how one looked at it, it was a very messy place. Their small team's meeting place had always been the detective's plane, which was called the living room. Yavala used her divine artifact, the Golden Ball, to open a long-distance channel and teleported them to the plane 10,000 meters above the ground. This was Thea's first time using someone else's teleportation door. She could only say that it was indeed a divine artifact. It was convenient, fast, stable and efficient. As long as she remembered a certain location, she could teleport there regardless of the distance. The only regret was that this thing could be used by anyone. After all, Thea and Diana were outsiders and did not participate in their discussion. Miraculously, their small team had subconsciously excluded Mira, the Sea King's wife. The Sea King was muddle-headed and did not realize that something was wrong. At this moment, Mela's grievance was indescribable. Originally, she and the Sea King were living a good life in the lighthouse at Sandport. Suddenly, Yawala teleported over and said that Casina was in danger. Her husband hurriedly brought her here to save him. In all honesty, Mela did not know any Yawala or Casina at all. Then, she was bewitched by the cheetah god and fought with Thea and Diana for a long time. In the end, she ran to this plane to discuss countermeasures. God had mercy on her. She did not even know who the enemy was. In her own tribe, Mela was the symbol of royalty because of her ability to control water. In Atlantis, she was also trained to be the queen. Now that she was being ostracized by the Sea King's small team, she was very sad. However, she could not show it on her face and could only stand outside and watch them discuss. After listening for a while, Thea understood why they could not defeat the black manta rays. Casina was known as a prophet, but in fact, her ability was very limited. She was similar to Lisa Dracker, who worked under Sinisto. She could only predict what would happen in the next few seconds. Yawala was a wild child who grew up in the jungle. The fact that she could stutter and speak English was a sign of her talent. Asking her to come up with ideas was just a dream. Prisoner of War was always surrounded by the souls of his comrades, and was immersed in his own inner world for 59 out of 60 minutes. On the other hand, Vostok was severely autistic. He would rather wear a helmet that did not allow him to eat and hide for 2 years than speak a word to others. In their team, the only two who could come up with ideas were the detective and the Sea King. However, the detective was an old man in his 70s and was very conservative. He suggested to the Sea King that they should split up again and lure the black manta rays to steal the 3 divine artifacts. Then they would set up an ambush. The Sea King naturally would not let his companions take the risk. His idea was to find the other party and fight directly. The detective would never agree to it, and the two argued for half an hour. In the end, the Sea King was prepared to jump off the plane alone to chase after the black manta rays. Thea quickly stopped him. The black manta rays were just ordinary people. It was not a big deal. It was as if they were disbanding. "Arthur, my satellite has found traces of the black manta rays. He is buying some equipment in a black market in Germany." In fact, the satellite was just a lie. It was a report from Death Knell's eyes and ears in the black market all over the world. "Let's wait until there is no one around and take him down." Thea generally supported the Sea King's idea. According to the old detective, it was not necessary to go through so much trouble just for a surprise attack. Now with Thea, Diana, Mira and their small team, there were 9 of them. More than 10 divine artifacts could not take down the black manta rays? Thea did not believe it. The Sea King received unexpected support and gave the old detective a provocative look. The old man was very well-mannered and was not in the mood to care about the young man's smugness. He asked for the coordinates that Sia had mentioned and piloted the plane to fly straight to Germany. Thea transferred 2 more satellites to Europe and the signal was directly transmitted to the old detective's plane. It was not difficult to find the Black Manta Ray's unique diving helmet using facial recognition. The Black Manta Ray's figure soon appeared on the plane's display screen. How do we go down to catch him? The few of them scratched their heads. Thea asked carefully and found out that Ja Vala's teleportation divine artifact could only be used by people who had been to places or people who were very familiar with them. She had only met the Black Manta once and was far from being familiar with him. We still have to do it. Thea was delighted. Put on your equipment. I can teleport you all over. You can teleport too? With the help of the 2 jaguars as a bridge, Ja Vala was the closest to Thea in the Sea King's team. This girl who grew up in the jungle asked in disbelief. What did she mean by, I can teleport too? Thea pursed her lips. That was the function of the divine artifact. This was my own knowledge. It was not the same thing. She nodded casually, indicating that she could teleport too. She opened the Eye of Horus and observed the Black Manta Rays 10,000 meters below, looking for the best opportunity to attack. Chapter 375. It could be seen that Black Manta's body had not fully recovered. He was still a little wobbly when he walked. Although Diana did not use her full strength in that punch, and most of the impact of the punch was absorbed by his waterproof suit, the remaining force was not something an ordinary person like him could handle. He had escaped from the rainforest with his life on the line, and his injuries had worsened. He had injected some recovery potions, but the effects were not great. Thea looked around carefully. The enemy seemed to be defenseless, but under Horus' gaze, there were many people in diving suits around them. If she was not mistaken, they should be Black Manta's subordinates. He might have sensed that the Sea King and his party had a teleportation artifact, so he was vigilantly setting up an ambush around them. As the Sea King's archenemy, Black Manta knew his enemy very well. If it were not for Thea and Diana, the Sea King would have rushed into his encirclement. Everyone! Thea spoke to attract their attention. The enemy has set up an ambush around us. Their ambush is like this. Thea used her magic to draw a sketch in the air, marking out the few hidden enemies. Other than Black Manta, there are a total of 15 enemies. 8 in the east will belong to the 2 of us, and 7 in the west will belong to the 5 of you. Arthur, you and your wife, go and capture Black Manta. Prepare your equipment. I will open the teleportation door in a minute. Remember, go through it as fast as you can. Don't hesitate. Sia was really tired of their brainless fighting style. Just like how she instructed her subordinates in her own company, she assigned the specific tasks to each of them. The few of them had no objections to the mission, and the Sea King also felt that it was appropriate for the couple to deal with their old enemies. The old detective was a little dissatisfied, but he forced himself to endure it when he considered her identity. Let's go. Seeing that they were ready, Thea opened a dark blue teleportation door as fast as she could, and stepped in first. The others followed closely behind, and walked out in a single file. Attack! The enemy is here! Black Manta Ray suddenly saw a dark blue portal not far away. He immediately knew that something was wrong and gave the order at the same time as Thea, who had stepped out of the portal. Thea's divine longbow was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, she shot down 4 men in diving suits. Diana's long-range attacks were slightly slower than hers. She used her lassos to trap 2 men. The other 2 jumped over and knocked them down with a punch. On the other side, the Sea King's 5 companions had also defeated 7 ambushers. Everyone looked at the Sea King who was fighting. Don't interfere. This is between me and him. Sea King Arthur Curry even stopped Mira from helping. He was determined to defeat Black Manta with his own hands. Black Manta also realized that this was his last chance for revenge. His 2 long swords danced like windmills. He no longer thought about escaping or treating his injuries. All he wanted was to kill Arthur Curry. Even though the Sea King's physique was superior to Black Manta's in all aspects, Black Manta's technological equipment was specially prepared to deal with the Sea King. The two of them were evenly matched. The lightning from the Sea King's trident was offset by the laser from Black Manta's oxygen mask. The two of them fought as if their lives depended on it. The Sea King's tactic was to exchange injury for injury. However, his huge strength did not cause much damage to Black Manta's diving suit. Instead, the Sea King, who was not wearing a shirt, was slashed twice. Blood gushed out and flowed down his pants to the ground. "Do we need to help?" Diana asked. Thea shook her head. The Sea King and Black Manta had a grudge against each other. This was their own problem. It was not appropriate for outsiders to interfere. Black Manta was greedy. He went to steal the Sea King's blood and accidentally injured the Sea King's father. The Sea King naturally went to seek revenge. However, after he killed Black Manta's father by mistake, he found out that his father was only injured at that time and died of a heart attack. The target of Black Manta's revenge was instantly reversed. In his grief and anger, Black Manta used up all his wealth and challenged the Master of the Seven Seas as an ordinary human. His actions were not to be judged, but his courage was worthy of praise. Thea saw courage in him that was not inferior to the Green Lantern's. It was totally possible for a few people to besiege the Leopard Lady because she was possessed by an evil god. However, if a group of people besieged Black Manta, Thea felt that she had become the villain. It was better to let him and the Sea King fight slowly. The Black Manta Ray gave it his all and found an opening. He used a huge fishing net to trap the Sea King and stabbed him with two sharp blades. The fishing net was made of an unknown material. The more the Sea King struggled, the tighter it became. The tall Sea King was trapped in a ball. The trident in his hand was a long weapon and could not be swung. He could only give up the trident and tear the fishing net with both hands. Black Manta was waiting for this opportunity. He stabbed him with two long blades. Unfortunately, no matter how good his calculations were, he was just an ordinary human. The Sea King was a hybrid of human and Atlantean. His natural strength, agility, and reaction speed were all above that of humans. Facing the two deadly long blades, the Sea King tilted his body slightly. One of the blades stabbed into his left shoulder and the other into his arm. His muscles tightened as he clamped Black Manta's long blade. He used his free hand to clench his fist and hit Black Manta's oxygen mask with all his might. One punch, two punches, three punches. Black Manta also realized his mistake. He wanted to let go of his blade and distance himself again. However, the Sea King changed from hitting to grabbing. He grabbed the air supply pipe at the edge of his oxygen mask and used his head as a hammer to hit Black Manta's oxygen mask. This fight is too ugly. Sia had the urge to cover her face. The Sea King seemed very brave in the battle, but if one were to compare the physical attributes of both sides, one would realize that he was completely relying on his own high attributes and high recovery speed to bully his opponent. Diana, who admired the classical beauty of Greece, also turned her face away. Using brute force to defeat an opponent who was obviously weaker than himself was not the glory of a warrior. Mela did not care. In fact, she was happy with whatever her husband did. The Sea King's friends were also excited. They were just short of clapping their hands to cheer him on. Black Manta was knocked out of his senses. The laser on his oxygen mask fired continuously, hitting the Sea King's face and chest until it was a bloody mess. The Sea King ignored these injuries as if he had gone berserk. He kicked Black Manta to the ground and learned the tactic that Batman used against Bane. Pull out the tube. He grabbed the tube on Black Manta's oxygen mask and pulled it out. With a crack, one of the oxygen tubes was forcefully pulled out. A large part of the oxygen mask was also torn apart. An African man's face was revealed. The laser on Black Manta's oxygen mask was completely useless. However, he still had a lot of equipment on him. The two of them fought hand to hand. Each of the Sea King's punches caused great damage to him. However, Black Manta was also ruthless. He used all kinds of weapons on the Sea King. Water spikes, brass knuckles, stun guns, ropes with sharp blades. Black Manta used whatever he could grab. In the end, he even stuffed a mini mine into the Sea King's wound. Chapter 376. Boom! The continuous attacks made Black Manta a little dizzy. There was a mistake in the estimation of the detonation time of the mine. Just as it got close to the Sea King's skin, it exploded on his own hand. Both of them suffered a violent impact. Although Black Manta's left hand was cushioned by the diving suit, it was still seriously injured by the explosion. Not to mention the shirtless Sea King. He took half of the explosion. The original 5-centimeter wound was blown into a big hole, vaguely showing signs of internal organs. "Don't come over." The Sea King, who was stunned by the explosion, quickly stopped them when he saw that they were about to attack. The enemy was only left with a sliver of health. He could not let them take advantage of him. He staggered to Black Manta's side and raised his huge fist. When he realized that his opponent's diving suit had excellent defense, he attacked his opponent's half-exposed head. "Do you admit defeat? How dare you chase after my companion? How dare you offend the dignity of Atlantis?" After all, Black Manta was just an ordinary person. He could not take 2 punches and fainted in a daze. Although the Sea King's recovery was strong, he was still in a trance. He was relying on the unyielding belief in his mind to support himself as he punched again and again. "Arthur, he has lost consciousness. You are the winner." Mela looked at her husband like a crazy fan, her eyes full of love. "I won. Yes, I won." The Sea King, Arthur Curry, stood up with his tall body and raised his right fist. He was enjoying this hard-won victory. Thea saw this scene and clenched her teeth. The Sea King was now covered in wounds. There was a long sword in each of his shoulders and arms. There were also many steel needles, daggers, and other sharp weapons on his body. There was a big hole in his stomach and a rope full of barbs was wrapped around his neck. The left side of his face was burned by Black Manta's laser. Those who knew would say that Black Manta had many tricks up his sleeves to counter the Sea King. Those who did not know would think that he had gone to play the role of Whitebeard in the war. You beat up an ordinary person who has not received any combat training? You still have the guts to raise your arms and cheer. For the sake of the Death King's staff, in order to maintain a friendly relationship with Atlantis, Thea turned her face away and resisted the urge to complain. The fight was too fierce. Thea waited for a while before the Sea King stopped waving his arms and shouting in a particularly silly manner. Thea guessed that he was most likely too heavily injured to continue shouting. Thea raised her hand and cast a healing spell on him. Although his recovery ability would greatly increase once he entered the sea, Thea was afraid that he would die before he could reach the seaside. Based on the principle of fairness, he also cast a healing spell on the Black Manta on the ground. He did not have the Sea King's regenerative abilities, and his face was deformed as if he had been run over by a train. Without external healing, it would take at least a year or so for him to recover. Black Manta was securely tied up, and his men were of no consequence. The few of them did not have time to discuss. Vala opened her divine artifact teleportation door and teleported everyone to the beach. Because the Sea King Arthur Curry was bleeding non-stop, his recovery speed was not as fast as the bleeding speed, and he was so weak that he could not speak. After being teleported to the North Sea, Mira gently controlled the water and swept her husband into the sea. The few of them waited for less than half an hour before they saw the lively Sea King reappear in their sight. This guy's regenerative ability in the sea was really fast. Thea could not help but think that if they fought this guy, they would have to leave the water source. Otherwise, his regenerative ability was almost on par with the Kryptonians, and no one could beat him in the water. "Arthur, do you want me to hand this guy over to the Heaven's Eye Society or do you want to take him away?" Thea saw that the Sea King had almost recovered and asked. "This." The Sea King, who had recovered from his injuries, regained his composure. Looking at Black Manta, who was beaten up badly by him, he felt a little guilty. He had killed his father and beaten him up. It seemed too cruel to hand him over to the Heavenly Eye Society now. He deliberated over his words. He has killed many Atlanteans. I want him to be brought back to face trial. Thea nodded and acquiesced to this solution. The Black Manta was almost harmless to the land. If the Sea King wanted to save his life, he would only be asking for trouble. However, that had nothing to do with Thea. The Sea King wanted to bring the Black Manta back to Atlantis. He did not arrange for a tour. Now that she had the water attribute, Thea, who did not like to go into the water, naturally did not mention it. She remembered that the Sea King's family was still in a mess, and she was not interested in getting involved. A white light flashed on the trident. Even without an oxygen mask, the Black Manta could be dragged into the sea. Everyone watched as they swam into the deep sea. Thea and the rest returned to the plane and rushed to Death King's Island. When they arrived at the Atlantic Ocean, it was already night time. A thin layer of fog rose from the surface of the sea, and the waves rose and fell gently. Occasionally, There would be a few scattered islands. If they were here for sightseeing, the environment would be very beautiful. Unfortunately, it was not the Death King's island that they were looking for. Thea, Diana, and Mira had not been here before. The task of finding the way was naturally left to the Sea King's friends. However, these people were either autistic, mentally ill, or had never learned geography. They did not refuse at all. The task of finding the way automatically fell to the old detective. At first, the old man patted his chest and said that there was no problem. However, after wandering around the Atlantic Ocean for an hour, his tone was not so sure. In this hour, the old man patted his chest more than 10 times. However, his words became less and less confident. At first he said, "It's around here." Now he said, "It's probably around here." In desperation, they could only land on an island. Mira used her special communication method to call the Sea King. They waited in boredom. Midway, Diana sparred with a few of them. Thea and Yawala went back to her jungle and hugged a 1-month-old jaguar. They were going to bring it back to Star City to play with. In the Sea King's small team, Thea had the best relationship with this girl who grew up in the jungle. Yawala was very simple. She stubbornly believed that people who were good to animals were good people. In addition, she saw the relationship between Thea and Diana. She was even more envious because she had a crush on the Arabian girl, Cassina. It was just that she did not dare to say it out loud. After waiting for an entire night, they finally saw the Sea King's exhausted figure when the sun was about to rise. There were no scars or signs of a fight, which could only mean that his trip home this time was not pleasant. The few of them did not say much and silently followed him. Based on their previous experience on the island, Thea judged that there was a very strange magic on the island. It was very similar to Paradise Island. It was impossible to find it with the naked eye. However, the Sea King's trident could automatically guide the way. They did not take a plane again. The Sea King summoned a few docile dolphins for them to ride. Chapter 377. Thea was a little impatient after sitting for a while. She changed into her water armor. She did not show her fastest speed when she was carrying Fiora last time. She wanted to test how fast she was underwater. "I didn't expect you to swim so fast." Mira, the Sea King, who also did not ride a dolphin but relied on her own ability to swim, was shocked by Thea's sudden burst of speed. Although it was far from the trident-wielding Sea King, it was very close to Mira's speed. "I'll compete with you in swimming." Mira did not have a smooth day. She could not see the feelings between human women. She felt that her husband was an indomitable spirit. The Arabian woman Cassina, the brown-skinned wild child Yawala, Thea, and Diana were all threats to her position. Among them, the unusually active Thea was the biggest threat. She could not win on land, but she did not think she would lose in the sea. Thea did not think so much. There was no need to set the rules or ask for a judge. Both of them were ready to swim forward at the same time. She relied on the armor to provide power. Mira also had almost unlimited physical strength in the sea. Both of them shot out at the same time like an arrow released from a bow. Mira quickly took the lead with her skillful movements. Thea instructed Gideon to scan her movements, the angle of entry, and the frequency of her body swaying. After that, the simulation was optimized and applied to the armor. Mira's speed quickly caught up. "You learned so fast?" Mira did not know about the existence of artificial intelligence. She saw Thea's familiar movements, which were very obviously mimicking her swimming posture. She thought that Thea had learned it after seeing it once. She was shocked. This mainlander's learning ability was too scary. Although she was shocked, she was still far from being convinced. Mira mobilized a large amount of seawater to give herself a push. Her speed increased by 30%. So it could be played like this. Thea felt that she had learned another trick. This time, she did not use Gideon. Although she did not use it usually, she still had the water attribute. She imitated Mira and gathered a large amount of water magic behind her to push herself forward. 1,500 nautical miles. 1,600 nautical miles. 1,650 nautical miles. The propulsion effect was immediate. Gideon truthfully reported her speed, which finally stopped at nearly 1,700 nautical miles per hour. Mela sensed that she was catching up to her again and could only increase her speed as fast as she could. Thea followed behind her unhurriedly. When they reached the Death King's island and everyone came ashore, Thea was still in high spirits. Mela was so tired that her face was pale. She soaked in the sea alone for a long time before she could catch her breath. "You fought with her again?" Diana asked Thea softly as she looked at Mela's pale face. "No, I was just following behind her. From the beginning to the end, I didn't surpass her. I have to say that she swam really fast." Thea acted as if nothing had happened. She did not use any energy at all. She was using the armor's energy source. She was also puzzled. Thea did not know that it was this, from the beginning to the end, that forced Mela to use the fastest speed in her life. The Sea King also did not understand why his wife was swimming so hard. He asked about her well-being and Mela's legs were trembling. However, she pretended as if nothing had happened and pulled the Sea King to show off their affection. Unfortunately, other than her, there were 4 women present who had indescribable relationships with each other. As for the remaining 3 men, one was severely autistic while the other was half crazy because of being haunted by ghosts. The only normal one was the old detective. However, the old man was 70 years old and his grandson was 20 years old. He could not understand Mela's good intentions. Mela spread a bunch of dog food on the spot and found that the onlookers were stable and did not have any excessive reactions. She felt that she had punched empty air and followed the others to the island. The island was not big. If they did not walk close to it, even the Eye of Horus would not be able to discover the island. The plants on the island were very sparse. There was a mountain that was not too tall in sight. From time to time, dark red magma would flow out. The entire island was shrouded in a layer of invisible black smoke due to the high temperature. The few of them entered the cave on the side of the mountain. The cave was very deep. Along the way, everyone seemed to have lost interest in talking and carefully walked deeper into the cave. After walking for an hour through the winding bends, the view in front of them suddenly opened up. A high platform of man-made sculptures appeared in front of Thea. On the platform stood a huge throne. Behind the throne, there were 4 female statues that were either looking up or bowing their heads. The Sea King pointed to the female statues and said, "Back then, the artifacts in their hands were placed on those statues." Thea observed for a while. The god of death had fallen into a deep sleep. This island was just a diversion to hide the news of his death. The layout was not complicated. Or rather, the era he lived in was still pursuing the huge amount of magical power. The precision of the use of magic was far inferior to modern magic. You guys find 3 artifacts randomly and use them. Don't release them. I will find the frequency of the resonance and we can open the secret compartment. Javala took out her golden transmission bead first. Cassina also took out the golden seal that was snatched by the black manta ray. The Sea King raised the trident in his hand. The fluctuations of the 3 artifacts were very similar. Thea used her heart to feel the difference between them. Her hands moved slightly to adjust the resonance of the 3 artifacts. Finally, at a certain point, the 3 artifacts reached a very strange wave band. An invisible breeze swept in all directions. The female statue behind the throne slowly separated, and a golden staff slowly rose from it. The staff was 2 meters long and golden all over. It could be seen that the initial shape of the staff was very similar to a trident. However, later on, the trident was artificially combined into one. The 2 sides were extremely sharp. Upon closer inspection, there was an ancient text engraved on it. This staff was very similar to the staff in a game that Thea remembered, the Golden Staff of Sin, Dorii. Thea looked back at everyone. Seeing that no one had any opinions, she reached out and took the staff. The staff neither rejected her nor took the initiative to cater to her. The sky changed color, the wind and clouds surged, but none of these appeared. Only a faint image was transmitted to Thea. In the image, an old man was betrayed. After that, he created an artifact and returned to his country for revenge. After being betrayed by everyone, the old man angrily hit the magic node with the staff, causing the destruction of the ancient Atlantis Empire. This old man was the god of death, Atlan? Thea compared it with her memory and sighed. It was a pity. He had a good idea to eliminate war and accommodate all foreign races. However, he was betrayed by his family and turned from a great hero to a devil in an instant. Just as Thea was about to carefully study the functions of the staff, she heard a loud shout. "People from the surface! Put down the treasure in your hand. That is the sacred artifact of Atlantis." A large group of strangely dressed soldiers surrounded a young man holding a halberd and wearing a finned helmet walked in. Chapter 378. Where did this retard come from? Call it and see if it will answer you. Thea's strength had increased now, so she was not as cautious as before. Since the other party was rude, she would fight back. People from the surface. You. Before the young man with the helmet and halberd could finish his sentence, Thea turned her staff around and a dark golden lightning shot towards him. He didn't know what was real and what was not, so he cautiously dodged the attack. However, he underestimated Sia's combat experience. Just as he raised his leg and took 2 steps to the left, he saw a sharp spike suddenly rise from the ground. Coincidentally, it was aimed at his indescribable thing. The young man was shocked. He no longer cared about his demeanor and directly fell back, avoiding this fatal attack. The spike avoided the greaves at a tricky angle and cut a big wound on his inner thigh. Blood was dripping. A few of his subordinates quickly helped him up. Let go. The young man was very unhappy. His helmet had also fallen off, revealing a somewhat dignified face. His originally flashy clothes were now covered in mud because he fell to the ground. The leg guards on his cloak were also stained with blood. His originally arrogant aura had been forcefully reduced by half. How dare you attack me? The young man gritted his teeth and said. Thea replied scornfully. Retard. The staff in her hand accumulated energy again. This was not a game. It was impossible to tell the user the attributes of a piece of equipment. The specific functions of the staff needed to be tested. Stop, all of you stop. The Sea King Arthur Curry stood in the middle and stopped the 2 sides from continuing to fight. Seeing him jump out to be the leader, Thea went with the flow and continued to study the staff. This young man appeared here. He was wearing a fish helmet and holding a halberd. Combined with the strange soldiers behind him, it was not difficult to guess his identity. Sea Lord Amu, Arthur Curry's half-brother and his most direct competitor for the throne. The 2 brothers were very similar to Thor, and Loki from Marvel Next Door. The only difference was that the older brother was a mixed blood, while the younger brother was a pure blood. At Marvel Next Door, the older brother was a pure blood, while the younger brother was a mixed blood. There were too many similarities. The elder brother was reckless, and the younger brother was cunning. The elder brother didn't want the throne, but the throne automatically fell on his head. The younger brother wanted the throne, but he couldn't get it no matter what. Thea scoffed at this kind of melodramatic love and hate. As long as the other party didn't provoke her, she wouldn't meddle in other people's business. Amu, you're following me. The Sea King wasn't stupid. He immediately figured out the cause and effect. Amu pointed at Sia, and with a swipe of his finger, he included a large group of people. Arthur, you actually gave all the artifacts of Atlantis to these surface people. You don't deserve to be called the ruler of the 7 seas. Thea looked at him with a smile and didn't say anything. Originally, only Diana was standing beside her. But now, due to Amu's aggressive actions, a few of the Sea King's companions instantly stood on his side. They didn't care about the divine artifact, but Amu wanted to take it back just like that. Nobody could tolerate it. Mara hesitated. Amu wanted to steal her husband's throne, so she couldn't support him. She looked left and right, but there was no other choice. She also stood on Thea's side. The negotiation between Amu and the Sea King broke down after a few words. In his heart, Sia was only powerful because of the artifact. The few surface people were like weak chickens in his eyes. He waved his hand and commanded his subordinates, "Kill those surface people. The artifact must belong to Atlantis. Don't hurt them." The Sea King Arthur Curry hurriedly shouted. In fact, he was afraid that Thea and the others wouldn't hold back their strength. The soldiers in front of him were all his people. Amu misunderstood the subject of his sentence. He thought that his wild brother was worried about his friends. He grinned and held his halberd, wanting to entangle the Sea King. But after the 2 brothers exchanged 2 blows, he realized that something was wrong. He saw his subordinates rushing forward in a hurry. Then, they were beaten back as if they were riding on clouds. Screams of pain could be heard endlessly. The Atlantean armor that usually had excellent defensive capabilities seemed to be non-existent. A few of his subordinates were sent flying dozens of meters away. There was a hint of misery in their screams. "Are you kidding me?" Amu stretched his neck and looked to the side while he was fighting. The one-sided situation that he had predicted had indeed occurred, but it was his side that had the advantage. He saw a valiant woman holding a sword and a shield send his elite guards flying one by one as if she was throwing rubbish. Only his guard captain lasted 3 moves, but Diana also took special care of him and broke one of his legs with a kick. The guard captain, who used to be extraordinarily brave, was now hugging his leg and howling in grief. "These guys aren't strong." Diana told Thea the truth. In her eyes, these guys were not much stronger than the German devils she fought before. "That's because you're much stronger than before." Thea could only explain it this way. In her eyes, these elite Atlantean soldiers were quite powerful. She could easily take out tens of thousands of them and beat up the armies of other countries. The only flaw was that only a small number of soldiers could fight in the water. These small number of soldiers had to bring special breathing equipment. Otherwise they would not be able to fight. Regardless of whether Atlantis leaders wanted peace or war, their bodies were no longer suitable for living on the surface. Conquering the land and restoring the glory of the past was just a dream talk. People on the surface are so powerful? This woman is Greek? Amazon? Amu almost broke down. He finally realized what the Sea King meant when he said not to hurt people. He was so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. He tried hard to keep his mind calm. Then, he carefully observed Diana's appearance and equipment. There was no doubt that she had a full set of divine weapons. However, the forging style was obviously different from the Atlanteans. Unlike Arthur Curry, who was a wild child, Amu and even Mela were members of the royal family who had received strict education. It was true that Amu was arrogant, but he still had a basic sense of identification. After careful observation, it was not difficult to notice the difference between Diana's appearance and that of the current humans. "Take your men and leave this place now." The Sea King looked around and found that most of the soldiers had superficial injuries. They would recover after 2 days of recuperation in the water. He nodded at Diana to express his gratitude and turned his head to order Amu loudly. Amu was a lone commander. He needed this to get out of the embarrassing situation. He snorted and ran away with his defeated subordinates. Sigh. The Sea King sighed. There were too many troublesome things. The people on the surface did not accept him, and the people on the bottom of the sea were rejecting him. He was like a rat in a bellows, suffering from both sides. Everything here was over. He held Mela's hand and bade farewell to the others. Thea looked at the scene. There was no explanation document, so she could only go back and study the functions of the staff. She also left the cave with Diana and the others. The cave that was in full swing just now regained its tranquility as if nothing had happened. Chapter 379. Diana continued to work on her foundation, while Thea returned to Star City alone with the little jaguar and the staff. She handed the little jaguar to someone else and began to study the functions of the staff. The attributes were easy to judge. The staff had earth and water attributes. Thea dealt with Amu's spikes with the magic provided by the staff. With the power of the staff, Thea could form a pseudo-cycle of light, darkness, earth, fire, water, and wind in her body. It was still far from the real 6 attributes, but there were some embryonic forms. With the help of the earth attribute magic in the staff, Thea could already cast some more advanced earth attribute spells. The next time she dealt with the leopard lady, she might be able to solve it with a dungeon spell or a large-scale earth fissure spell. After studying for 3 days, Thea finally summed up a few characteristics of the staff. The God of Death staff was the best for earth attribute and water attribute spells, with about 3 times the effect. It was slightly worse for wind, light, and dark attributes, with only a little more than double the effect. The fire attribute was the worst, with less than half the effect. The staff contained 2 very ancient magic, one of which was to control sea beasts. Thea was initially very confused about the definition of sea beasts. After studying for a long time, she realized that the staff referred to the super-large ancient sea creatures. After searching her memory for a long time, Thea could only remember one sea beast. She only remembered that there was such a standard ancient sea beast hidden in the abyss of the Atlantean capital. It looked roughly like a hybrid of a crab and an octopus. For tens of thousands of years, the Atlanteans could only mind their own business until Arthur Curry returned. His outstanding telepathic ability could control all sea creatures. Although it was difficult to deal with this ancient giant beast, it could be said that he could slightly control the sea beast. It was because of this extraordinary ability that the Atlantean Council of Elders broke the 10,000-year-old Iron Law and allowed him, a mixed blood, to inherit the throne. If Thea went to Atlantis with the staff and claimed that she could control their biggest biological weapon, the Council of Elders would definitely kill her. Although it was a good idea, it could easily destroy the relationship between the two sides. Moreover, the strength of the deep-sea giant beasts would be greatly reduced on land. Thea secretly remembered this spell and wanted to see if she could improve it in the future and integrate it into her existing knowledge system. The description of the remaining function was even more vague. Thea could only understand that it was a combination of imprisonment and sealing. It would ignore the target size and imprison them in a very small crystal. There was no information on whether there was a limit to the target's strength or how long the imprison could last. Maybe the god of death who made the wand would know, but this guy didn't leave any information in the wand. Thea had no choice but to run to the poison ivy's greenhouse in the metropolis. She tried to find a bunch of plants for a long time, but it was completely ineffective. Was the level of the plants too low, or did the confinement spell have other requirements for the target? There were too many options, and Thea couldn't figure it out in a short time. In the experiment, Thea found another function that wasn't really a function. This wand was different from the wands used by modern wizards and wizards. It was also a weapon. When waved around, it would create a strong wind. If hit, it would kill. If touched, it would be injured. Poison ivy's man-eating plants were enough to prove this point. Boss, do you have a grudge against my plants? Poison ivy's eyelids drooped as she said helplessly. As the number of interactions increased, Thea also revealed her true colors. She found that Thea was younger than herself by 2 years. Poison ivy was no longer as afraid of her as before, and could even joke with her from time to time. I'm doing a little experiment. Oh right, have you found the things I asked you to collect? Seeing that she had destroyed a corner of Poison Ivy's greenhouse, Thea was a little speechless. The new weapon that she had obtained was more like a hammer than a wand. She had strengthened it many times, otherwise, ordinary people on Earth wouldn't be able to handle this ancient Atlantean artifact. When it came to business, Poison Ivy became a little more serious. Billy Batson, I've already approached this child. His hair and blood have been collected quite a bit. According to your request, every time I talk to him, I've recorded it. I've also entered the original audio file into the main control computer. Boss, what's the use of this child? You didn't allow me to bewitch him. That child is too childish. I'm just chatting with him. It's really boring. Poison Ivy said with some confusion and some pride. It's just a casual move. Thea said lightly. Billy Batson, the future superhero Shazam. She said that it was a casual move, but in fact, this was her real purpose. Shazam and Black Adam were the only 2 mortals in the world with abundant divine power. However, this divine power was not cultivated by them, but was given by a ritual. When Shazam received the power, he could instantly contend with Superman. This was something that Thea had been envious of for many years. However, absorbing their divine power was not enough. Thea needed to spend a lot of time to artificially downgrade the given divine power into her own magic power. When her magic power reached the peak, only then could she transform it into divine power, a divine power that belonged solely to her. The old wizard, Shazam, was born 9,000 years ago. He was originally a shepherd boy. After receiving the blessings of the gods, he became the first Shazam. In the Magic Desert era, after the gods retreated, he thought that he was a true god. Unfortunately, he only had power but not vision. He thought that he was the guardian of the world, but in fact, he had done countless foolish things. Pandora was like that, Black Adam was like that, and Billy Batson was also like that. He chose Billy Batson as his successor. As long as Billy shouted out the 2 words, Shazam, he would be able to obtain Superman's power. His standard for choosing his successor was extremely vague. The most virtuous person. How could there be a virtuous person among humans? This was just a beautiful goal, an impossible moral standard. The old Shazam, who was a shepherd boy, slapped his thigh and came up with such a standard. Although it was a melodramatic standard, at least there was a standard. Then, how did the old Shazam choose his successor? He cast a wide net and searched the whole world. When he found one, he saw if he was suitable, brainwashed him and let him go. He searched again, and repeated the cycle again. The Heaven's Eye Association found thousands of people who had lost their memories. These people were all done by the old Shazam. They were all the most virtuous people he had chosen. It was such an unreliable selection. In the end, he did not know if it was because he was annoyed or because of other reasons, but Billy Batson came into his sight. The old man immediately decided that this child was the most virtuous person. The old man only felt that the 15-year-old Billy Batson's parents were killed when he was young, and he did not take the path of revenge on society. Therefore, he insisted that this child was the most virtuous person. Billy Batson's childhood experience when his parents died was indeed worthy of sympathy. However, just because he did not take the wrong path, the old man concluded that he was the most virtuous person? There were 6 billion people in the world. Thea felt that she could find tens of millions of such candidates. Chapter 380. It was no exaggeration to say that there were not many superheroes who had a happy family. Were Superman and Batman considered the most virtuous people? Was Green Arrow considered one? Thea even felt that she was considered one. Old man Shazam felt that he had found his successor. After a simple ceremony, he handed over the divine power that the gods had given him and the heavy responsibility of protecting the world that he had imagined to a child with no social experience. He didn't pass on his life experience. Thea felt that the old man most likely didn't have any life experience himself. He didn't teach the use of magic either, so Shazam could only fight with Superman with his fists. In short, old man Shazam didn't care about anything. As if he had completed a mission, he pushed the confused Billy Batson out of the door. After that, Billy Batson was as happy as a runaway wild horse, showing off everywhere. His immature mind made him forget himself and did a bunch of stupid things, which led to Black Adam's pursuit. Billy Batson, who had forgotten the pain after the scar healed, didn't learn his lesson at all. He unscrupulously distributed the divine power to his friends. Even his pet, a tiger in the zoo, received the divine power. A tiger that could use magic. Thea didn't know what the gods would think if they saw this scene. She only felt that this was a big joke. Thea felt that she had done a good thing by absorbing the divine power that had been misused. Billy Batson was just a child. The heavy responsibility of protecting the world was not something he could bear. Thea felt that she had never been so righteous. She ordered Poison Vine Lady to continue to keep in contact with Billy Batson. The more samples she collected from his voice, the better. With a lot of gene samples, Thea came to a planet that was somewhat similar to Earth. Death Knell was responsible for grasping the dark information of Earth, so Fiora grasped the information of several nearby galaxies. During the days when she followed General Zod, Fiora had always been in charge of contacting various aliens and collecting resources. The task that Thea had given her now was to collect information and build her own force. Fiora was very skilled in doing these things. Gertrude had also sent a lot of mind-controlled soldiers from the controlled planets. In addition to Fiora's high-level combat power, she had already opened up a situation on the nearby planets. Clone an Earthling? Fiora took the gene sample and was a little puzzled. However, her character would never question anything and would only carry it out. I want to collect deep-sea beasts within our sphere of influence. I want to do some experiments. In addition, collect some plants and send them to the Poison Vine Lady on Earth. The sea beasts on Earth cannot be touched for the time being. Thea thinks that the alien sea beasts can also be controlled. The mission Thea gave Fiora was the most important one. She had to collect materials ranging from man-made clean energy to plants, animals, and rare metals. Thea herself had plenty of knowledge about Krypton genes. The modified cloning device was completely adapted to the human body on Earth. Unlike Lex Luthor, who needed 10 years to clone Superman, Superman's genes were too powerful. At this time, Billy Batson was just an ordinary person. Thea's standards were very low. She didn't need the clone to have high intelligence. She just needed to be able to shout out Shazam when the time came. The clone doesn't need any intelligence. The voice must match the standard of the sample sent by Poison Ivy. The higher the match, the better. Thea reminded Fiora again before returning to Earth. It's really hard to find Earth element magic. Shazam's matter was a long-term plan. Thea still had an urgent matter that had to be solved. That was the problem of her own Earth element magic. After completing all the elements, she could absorb a huge amount of magic and become a god in one fell swoop. This was her goal. She always felt incomplete if she lacked one element. She didn't have any clue at first. However, when Thea saw the Sea King's trident, she had found her goal by combining her memory and a lot of real information. That was Diana's half-brother, Hercules, the god of strength in human myths and legends. According to the records of various ancient books, he was definitely an earth attribute god. Hercules did not fall into the twilight of the gods. Instead, he was trapped in a different dimension. The key to opening the different dimension was the Sea King's trident. 10,000 years ago, the Atlantis and the Greek gods on the continent formed an alliance to fight against the giant creatures, the descendants of the ancient giants. They joined forces to drive the giant creatures into a barren different dimension. However, the giant creatures resisted very strongly. At the crucial moment, Hercules walked into that world and closed the door from the other side. This human hero, the warrior of Olympus, chose to sacrifice himself. His ideals were absolutely noble, and his goal could be considered as great. However, 10,000 years had passed. He, who was in a different dimension, fought against many giant creatures alone. His mind had fallen into madness. His lofty ideals no longer existed. What was left was only hysterical madness. Forming a team, pulling people, attacking monsters, and absorbing divinity. Thea felt that if she called more people, it was not impossible to push the Hercules away. However, now that Diana was involved, it was very difficult to do. From killing him to capturing him and restoring his consciousness, the difficulty of this suddenly increased by several levels. Thea had to use countless people to do this. At least, she had to call in the Martian hunter, who had always been a bystander, to help. In the original timeline, it was a professor who studied Atlantis who stole the trident and opened the seal. Thea did not intend to interfere with this matter. Hercules was released, and the giant creatures that were sealed with him would all be released. There were too many implications, and no hero's reputation could bear it. Thea instructed Death Knell to find the archaeologist and secretly provide financial support to speed up his research and encourage him to unearth more Atlantis ruins. The genetic medicine for his parents had entered the later stages of testing. Death Knell found many loyal subordinates to inject it. The response was excellent. Everyone who was injected felt like they had been reborn. Are there any after effects? Thea asked Death Knell beside her. They were watching a mercenary who had been injected with the genetic medicine perform a show of lifting a truck through the monitor. Thea did not care how much power this thing could bring to humans. Longevity and no after effects were what she valued the medicine for. Currently, there are no after effects. Everyone's state of mind is about the same as before, except for some excitement and insomnia, Death Knell answered carefully, emphasizing each word. Thea looked at his expression and said casually, "Are you afraid that these people will surpass you? Don't worry, these are just beginner genetic medicine. I've already prepared a few bottles of advanced ones. If they don't have after effects, you can inject them too. The effects of the medicine will directly overpower the Mirakuru you were injected with. Your leadership position will not change. I trust you a lot. After all, you are my brother's friend, right?" Thea laughed and walked out of the basement, leaving Death Knell speechless. Chapter 381. Thea didn't mention Oliver casually. She had a premonition that Oliver would appear at any moment. It had been 4 years since the shipwreck incident, and many things had changed because of her involvement. Thea wouldn't be surprised if the green arrow popped up in the next second. The gene concoction still required further observation of the various parameters of the test subjects. Thea also wanted to wait for Oliver to return before gathering everyone together to inject the gene concoction. Otherwise, everyone would have to explain everything at length, and it would be troublesome just thinking about it. The metropolis gradually calmed down, and everything seemed to be going in a good direction. Thea was busy with her experiments, Luther continued to hide in the dark, planning something, and Superman worked while doing good deeds. From fighting criminals to rescuing stray cats, there was nothing he didn't do. From time to time, he would do something fun with Louise Lane, and the world seemed to have settled down. Sister Thea. The one who rushed to the lab was Thea's first disciple, Damian Wayne. Because of Shadow's ambiguous relationship with Oliver, she wasn't officially his disciple. At most, she was just acting as his disciple. Plus, she had a good foundation, and with a little training, she became a hero. Now, Shadow worked with Thea every night to fight criminals. The only one left to learn from Thea was Damian, the naughty child. The two were very familiar with each other, and even Diana had seen Damian before. Thea never put on airs, and she would usually chat with Damian happily. To some extent, the two's relationship was better than Damian's relationship with his strict parents. Thea ignored Damien's yelling and continued with her experiments. The super gene optimization fluid was basically complete. According to her calculations, the molecular gene concoction, which was stronger than death knells, was about the same as Captain America's super soldier serum. However, the amount was too little. After all, it wasn't appropriate to always draw blood from Fiora. Thea was still waiting for the final experiment results before she could inject it into her parents. Jason. Jason is dead. Damien grabbed her arm and shook it hard. Thea's eyes were fixed on the liquid in the test tube. She subconsciously replied, "Oh." After 2 seconds, her thoughts were pulled back. Jason? The one beside Batman? Dead. Damien nodded his head painfully and looked at Thea with anticipation. Hey! Don't even think about it. I can't bring the dead back to life. Thea guessed what the kid was thinking. Are you kidding me? Resurrecting the dead? If I was so strong, why would I study medicine? Damien had learned magic from her for more than a year, and he knew the difficulty of resurrection. The level involved was too high. He couldn't help but sigh, and his little face drooped. Jason Todd's ideas were similar to Damien's. Both of them didn't agree with Batman's principle of not killing. He was one of the few people in the Batcave who could talk to Damien. Jason Todd. Thea listened to Damien's story and thought of the young man she saw that day. He was stubborn, confident, and unwilling to admit defeat. Now that a bomb had taken the life of such an outstanding young man, Thea sighed. It was fine if she didn't know, but now that she knew, she had to pay him a visit no matter what. After opening a portal that led directly to the Batcave, Thea pulled Damien and walked in. There were many familiar faces in the Batcave. The 3 old men, Old Gordon, Old Butler, and Old Fox were all there. Nightwing Dick Grayson, Batgirl Barbara, Catwoman, and Talia were also standing or sitting nearby. When they saw Thea and Damien walk out of the light screen, they just nodded slightly and didn't have the mood to talk. Batman's tall figure stood alone in the dark. Just like Luthor didn't need pity, Batman didn't need comfort. Thea didn't say much. She just lifted the white cloth on the platform. The body had obviously been cleaned up. The blood and dust had been washed away, but the bruises on the body were still a sign of the abuse the body's owner had suffered when he was alive. Their originally scattered gazes followed her movements and gathered on Thea. After all, she was one of the few extraordinaries in the world. Even Batman, who was originally standing straight, turned his head and looked at her expectantly. His situation is very strange. I don't think he's completely dead. That's the only way I can describe it. Thea examined the body repeatedly and came up with this plausible conclusion. Jason's heart has stopped beating, but his brain is still resisting the illusion. In other words, his body is dead, but his brain is still alive. However, this time will be very short. If he realizes that everything in the outside world has ended, then he will die at any time. Thea crossed her arms and said thoughtfully, "Do you have a way?" Batman asked anxiously. Thea didn't answer directly. She took out the most advanced medical cabin from the dimension ring. According to Gideon's estimation, the medical cabin's technology was at least 70 years ahead of Earth's current technology. A few idlers quickly came up to help. Wiring, electrifying, testing, and a series of tasks were completed. Only then did the bruised Jason Todd enter. Scanning and formulating a medical plan. Although Batman's mind was in a mess, he forced himself to calm down and discuss the plan with her. The two quickly agreed on a plan. The medical cabin's shield closed and the 4 mechanical arms began to work quickly. Batman saw Jason enter the medical cabin and seemed to have some hope. He quickly asked Thea, what happened after that? However, Thea didn't say what he wanted to hear. The situation is very complicated. His heart has stopped beating, but his consciousness hasn't dissipated. This means that he is using the remaining life force in his body to maintain his life. He is overdrawing his life force every minute and every second. This kind of overdraft is comprehensive. I estimate that the probability of him waking up is less than 10%. Even if he wakes up, he won't be able to continue fighting. What about magic? Batman, who had always been hostile to supernatural forces, asked bitterly. This involves what modern medicine calls consciousness. We call it the level of the soul. The effect of magic is minimal. Thea shook her head and briefly explained. It's fine as long as he can come back to life. Batman's voice was hoarse. Unlike the usual voice changer, this was his own voice. It was just that he hadn't drunk water for a long time, so it was particularly harsh, like a hard object rubbing against sandpaper. This time, the medical cabin's working time was unusually long. It took a full 3 hours. There's a heartbeat. Nightwing, who had been staring at the instrument on the side, shouted happily. However, Thea and Batman's faces were gloomy. Jason Todd didn't sit up as energetically as usual. There was only a weak pulse, indicating that this person had escaped death. However, he was still far from coming back to life. What should they do next? This thought lingered in the minds of the few of them.